making sound to myself. Hello. Hello.
Hey, I was gonna ask you some advice to start this off. So, you know how I'm like really, really, really smart and stuff?
Totally.
Like really fucking smart. Okay, well, I know that like people really appreciate it when you take time to let them know just how smart you are, and I'm trying to think of creative new ways to do it. Right? Like I've left copies of The God Delusion in places where people can tell that I read it.
Do you put that like in the background? Is it in the background there now?
No.
Oh.
That's my bad. That's my bad. I don't know. I've just noticed that people who are really smart really love letting everybody else know how smart they are, and so I would like to continue to come up with creative ways to do that. And one of my newest ways, like one of the most effective ways that I've found lately is have you ever heard of logical fallacies?
No,
I haven't.
Dude,
What's
seriously.
logical
Okay. Well, luckily I'm here and I'm like really, really fucking smart, and I can teach you two plebes about logical fallacies because they are awesome for letting people know how smart you are. Just the other day, I think I might have told this story before, but just the other day, we're sitting there in our break trailer during lunch. People are scrolling through their phones and sharing like different news articles that they saw, and they're like, one of the guys like, man, that guy, I'm sick of the news. There's so many pedophiles in the news stories, and I can't handle it anymore. And they're all getting riled up. They're like, yeah, remember that one guy that worked here that was a pedophile? Oh, yeah. And some guy said, I don't fucking care who you are. You're not a real man if you diddle kids. And I was like, oh my God, I've been waiting for a chance to let everybody know how smart I am. And I was like, actually, sir, you've just committed the no true Scotsman fallacy. I can actually point you to several adult human males who have indeed diddled kids. You want to know what
Got him.
They reacted in the same way that bikers think passers-by will react when they rev their engines really hard.
Yeah.
They were like, oh, you're so fucking smart.
Thank you, King.
If you can think of any new ways for me to, let everybody know how goddamn smart I am, then I'd love to know.
Have you pulled up a list of them and repeated the list to other people? And when you repeat the list to other people, pretend like you have them all off the top of your head, and like you're sitting there evaluating like the Matrix, every single line that everybody says everywhere at all times, with all the long list of cards of logical fallacies they may be committing in that one moment. You do that.
I'm smart enough to do it. I swear to God, I'm smart enough to do it. I just haven't got there yet. I could do it though. I'm smart. Okay.
Yeah. I think you started out with the logic, like telling people about a logical fallacy. So, Flip's got the Holy Spirit of contention. I was almost going to name this episode Alligator Azkaban, the Alligators of Azkaban.
That's a good name.
But I decided to go. We could just like call the whole podcast that from now on. The Alligators of Azkaban. Switch it around. And I'm Chris Phallacy.
I like it.
What I am today. What's going on? What's going on in the news? Because I mean, I actually don't want to do like terrible much of politics stuff. But is there politics stuff worth getting out of the way?
The big beautiful bill.
Yay!
Yeah.
It'll either bankrupt us or turn us into an economic powerhouse. Those are the two options. It's one or the other.
Let's roll the fucking dice.
Have you heard of the fallacy of the false dichotomy? This is called the fallacy of the false dichotomy, and you just
is that a thing?
Yeah.
God damn it, Chris is smarter than me. He beat me to it.
See, I've been working my way through Mormon Stories episodes, and I'm still in 2006. So
you're nowhere near logical fallacies because Exmormons didn't discover those until about 2013.
I don't think they came out until about. Did logical fallacies exist before yesterday?
I don't think so.
I don't think so because that's when I learned about them.
Yeah, but I already knew about them way back before I learned about them yesterday. I mean, I knew about them before they were cool.
Oh yeah, me too.
And I didn't just read the Wikipedia page of them. just now and repeated them to you. I knew about them already.
I saw the logical fallacies when they opened for Nirvana back. I was into them way long before you guys.
Well, the reason I got into it is because I care. I care about truth.
This is an empathy thing. We are like unapologetic truth seekers. It's one of those things where like most people, most people have some sort of a bias.
Yeah,
we've just kind of risen above that, is what I would say.
Yeah,
and
we're almost to Dylan neutrality.
You mean other people?
Yeah,
I'm
other
trying
people,
to
obviously.
get to Dylan neutrality, but I don't think that's
Dylan neutrality is difficult to achieve because in order to do that, you have to follow the truth wherever it goes, and where it goes is always left, which might seem odd to uncultured people who haven't been educated like we have. And it also usually involves blocking anyone, booting anyone from your group that kind of dissents a little bit.
Well, it's about safety. Don't you know it's about the safety of the community?
I just boot anybody who's causing harm.
The safety of the community is what
allows anyone to come to the table to speak truth as long as they're safe.
Yeah. He actually wants to hear from critics. Like he's really desperate for just critics to pipe up, but for some reason they just don't.
It just doesn't seem like anyone really criticizes him. All of his groups I've ever been in, I so rarely see anybody criticize him. It's insane. Of course, I'm not in those groups anymore because I got booted for criticizing him. But when I was in there, I didn't see very many people criticizing him.
Like I was saying earlier, all of the ex-Mormon critics of John Dehlin are like Gaza, and he's got like the Iron Dome of a bubble that keeps him clear and clean and free of all criticism. I guess we just go
okay. I'm sorry, Chris. I'm sorry, but I have to stop you there. That's a false equivalency to equate two things of just wildly different intensity. Okay, you're comparing John Dehlin, who is an integral guy, to a genocidal regime.
Yeah.
Full stop.
I think another logical fallacy was committed just right there. What was Flip just saying? We beg the question. We beg the question by saying truth is just good because good is truth, and that's because it's good. Like that's begging the question. But the real way you say begging the question in the podcast world is when it brings up necessitating a question. That's the podcaster way.
Did you ever learn where
begs the question? What's that?
Did you ever learn where begs the question comes from?
I
actually, I'm not even joking. I did just find this out today because in one of the facilities I go to, I can't have my phone, so we just have a bunch of books there. So I've been browsing Skeptic's Guide, and I was like, the fallacies. I'll look at it. Apparently, begging the question is just like a mistranslation from the Latin. I can't remember what actual Latin means, but yeah, that's not even what it was supposed to be. Like that's not.
It's one of the more frustrating ways to call something ever because it's.
Well, yeah, he actually just said in the book, he's like, I kind of almost recommend to people to not say it like this.
Yeah, it's just like in the world of work, like saying hostile work environment sounds like mean, but it means sexual harassment. It's like, come on, couldn't we just choose a different word? It's.
The hostile work environment, I think, is like when I'm in fear of getting punched in the fucking mouth or something. It's like some guy.
It also
makes a nice rack on you, toots.
It also makes people think they've got a legal case when they think someone's being mean to them.
Yeah, I thought hostile work environment was when you're in the military, but you're on the bad guys team. You have a hostile work environment.
Yeah. We're streaming all right?
No idea.
I'm
just the views or maybe just people aren't coming around. Maybe it's just 4th of July-ness and people have to catch it later. But
it is 4th of July Eve.
That is true. Anywho, so what should we get into the Jonathan Post and the Mormon stories first thing? Or,
yeah. And the replies.
I mean, I don't have like every single reply. Oh, I thought I had it.
Well, yeah, we don't have much
in the screen. But anyway, Jonathan made another post poking at the Mormon stories world about the wokeness. Here, I'll just go to the beginning of it in the thread. I don't want to show other stuff. I don't want to show accidental stuff. Here it is.
We lost our flip.
Is there just like internet weirdness going on?
I don't know. He just dropped out. I'm
Yeah,
sure he'll be back.
the live views are like popping, like they pop and disappear and pop and disappear. What's up, Mr. Croissant Boucher? Maple Lake Mountain's there, Troy Levitt's there, and device is not connected on Flip. He might have to like pop it on like a different thing, so we'll see. Here it is. Another post in Mormon Stories where none of us can go look at it. None of us can watch this. Wokeism is deadly to ex-Mormonism and the ex-Mormon community. Would you agree with this? Why or why not? And you got a bunch of new hatchlings or people. I learned. We're going to have to come back around because we're going to cover RFM and Colby's episode on logical fallacies. If nobody's picked up on that, or if you did not watch it last Saturday, and I believe they had Dr. Randy Bell on with them as well. But we're just going to come across the stuff or mention stuff that we'll come across later, because what you get here is a bunch of what I learned from RFM and Colby are called equivocations and equivocation fallacy, where they just immediately start asking, well, what do you mean by wokeism? Well, what do you mean by wokeism? What do you mean by,
Well, I mean, what I mean when I say woke is just having a general empathy and being nice to people and not actively hurting them. That's all I mean.
Oh, so you're doing what I learned from the RFM and Colby Reddish episode, a Mott and Bailey. Is that what you're doing? Because I think there is another definition to wokeism, but you just think it's the nice one. You think it's the Mott definition.
Well, that's what I say when I criticize it, and people are like, "What do you mean by woke?" I'm like, "Oh, I mean, I just fucking hate it when people are nice, you know? It's just the worst."
It just means people are nice and they're awake to people being mean to others, and I hate that. I hate that in my movies.
Yeah, I'm just fucking.
I hate that on my TV shows. I hate that in my stuff.
Like nobody's. Yeah, you go through that comment section. Not a single person's been called a faggot. It makes me so mad.
All right. Oh, I get a bunch of answers. Well, this is the reason why we get kicked out of the Lynn stuff. If we hadn't before, we'd get kicked out of it for it now. But I got kicked out of there, from what I can tell, because it was the last stuff I was posting about. That one time that Maven made a post about a transgender, supposedly biological educator, and I commented on there just the simple sentence: if I posted something that had the opposite information in it, it would get taken down. It would get kicked out. That was the last stuff I ever said on there, and then I went back and I can't even see the page anymore.
What an ironic comment to kick you out for.
Yeah, that's what it is. Unless there's some other random thing. And did Maven get kicked out for posting the entire video? No. And Colby Reddish, you know this one because you were there commenting and arguing with Streeter on that very one. I got kicked out of Mormon Stories for that one, and all I said was if I posted opposite information, that information would get taken down. I got kicked out.
They're like, nuh-uh, blocked.
I got completely blocked. That's the last post that I made on Mormon Stories.
Way to prove the point.
But maybe they were saying something like, "Oh, we know that you sometimes post stuff from the group on other stuff and review it, like Jonathan Streeter stuff or something." But yeah, no, you didn't. That's
actually what you just did right there is called the Steelman fallacy. You gave them a more charitable interpretation than what they deserve.
We should come up with a bunch of fallacy names for things that are good reasoning, but it just starts throwing people off. Like what?
You just committed the empiricism fallacy.
Yeah. You just completed the appeal to rigorous thought fallacy. That's the appeal to rigorous thought fallacy you just did right there, Bucko. Get off my timeline. So can you even see that on the screen? I can barely see that. Anyway, that's the woke burning through the pages of community right there. I don't know how much you would say. Like maybe you should just say the stuff that other people said instead of showing all those names. But some people said, I thought whenever you use wokeness was a replacement for the term the N-word, for the N-word. What's up, Steve? My Starbase Cola.
Well, I think there's a couple that just said like, oh, woke is a word that conservative bigots say.
What's so funny is they're all in such like a bubble, that Iron Dome bubble, once again, as I said earlier, if we're Gaza shooting missiles, John DeLynn is got the Iron Dome of Israel blocking all those missiles out because he doesn't hear criticisms. But the
John DeLynn's out there standing on his podium and being like, "They hate us for our freedom."
they hate us for freedom. He's George Bush.
They hate
George
us for our
Bush DeLynn.
empathy.
Yeah.
George Bush DeLynn. Yeah.
I don't understand. These people hate us because we're just so goddamn nice
Yeah.
and
Hey.
caring.
Hey, John DeLynn, there may be some criticisms about the way people have done medicalization in this trans world, and some they just hate us for our empathy. They just hate us for our empathy.
You know, the thing is, I think we brought this up before, but bring it up again. Like 10 years ago, ISIS did it in their magazine, because ISIS has a magazine. When ISIS was at its height, they published an article that was like, you know, a long form article like the Atlantic or New Yorker. And it was called "Why We Hate You, Why We Fight You," something like that. And in the article, they directly reference the Bush, why they hate us for our freedoms, and they said, yes, that's exactly right. Like they absolutely confirmed George was like, because, you know, liberals have been laughing for him for all that time. No, like they said, yep, that's right. We hate you because of your liberal freedoms that allow you to do things that are against Allah.
Boy, are my cheeks red.
Gee willikers.
Wouldn't it be funny
I guess
to buy a bunch of
a lot
those?
of thoughts then. Maybe we do just hate DeLynn for his empathy.
Yeah,
Like,
maybe
maybe
that's
we
it.
are
We're
DeLynn ISIS, and we just hate him for his empathy.
Wouldn't it be funny to buy a bunch of ISIS magazines and just put them on like a waiting room table in dentist's office and shit like that? Just wonder what happens.
I wonder if the heat is getting to Flip's thing, because he's popped off again with a device not connected down there. Yeah, so I mean, how did the posts on this go? They went about how they always go, right? I mean, just start calling to explain the stuff behind us.
There was like one of them that was actually pretty decent.
Yeah.
But,
oh, and I was gonna say, like, they're in such an Iron Dome bubble that I don't know that they even know that there's like a woke right battle going on. Like, I wonder if there's some people who are in complete denial that there's any sort of problem with the woke left, who, if you did explain to them the woke right, they would start believing in that. And like, there's not a woke left, but there is this woke right. That's totally true. But they don't even know that argument's going on because they're so in their own bubble.
I think I finally figured out what was going on.
Was it the heat waves were booting you off the internet?
No, it's I've been playing the Silent Hill 2 remake, and it wants you to play with a controller. And I've been using one of my 10-year-old PlayStation controllers, and it's got a dodgy connection. And I realized that every time I shook the table, it was spazzing it out and causing everything to go nuts.
Maybe it was doing one of those things where it's like those video games that actually try to scare you by messing with your hardware and stuff like that. Heard of those games?
no.
There's games that do that. There's games that like will mess with your hardware. You have to like plug into the second controller to get it to work and all that sorts of stuff that are haunted games.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, funny ideas. Or they'll mess with like make it look like your TV screen went blank and stuff like that. Yeah, cool games. Anyway, yeah, I guess we can't show all those, but it's just ridiculousness on end, just the people still in denial about it. Which, speaking of which, like just this week, I don't know if you guys followed any of the Elio stuff, the Pixar Elio.
Yes.
And then the Iron Heart dive, and there is just like
the Elio one was terrible. That is now the worst Pixar opening weekend of all time.
Oh, it's so sad too.
And it's like number one worst.
Yeah, well, from what you hear, the show is just terrible. But I've heard some. Did you hear the stuff about it was way more gay coded and had way more scenes that would have made it make more sense, but they did quick rewrites to remove those scenes out of it?
I don't know. I could see that. One of the funny things that I hear a lot of people complaining about is the art style.
Yeah, because it's got that Steven Universe bean mount.
They do that stupid shit, and people kept saying, "Oh, they took inspiration from Grubhub."
Yeah.
See that shitty Grubhub ad?
So it supposedly had a viewing that after the first viewing, people said, "How many did you go to see this in theater?" And not one single hand rose in the viewing.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And then they fired or wanted enough changes that the person who was running it, who was a gay man who wrote the story and all that sorts of stuff, who wanted it to be a little bit about his coming out story. They started moving parts of that story out of the story to leave the other stuff in, and just kind of like left it like a husk of the original story. And then it's just coming out like at the total tank dive, and it's diving in the ratings. And then Ironheart comes out, and they just do all the same old tropes of that one. The new Iron Man gal is going to be a young black gal who doesn't need any sort of inspiration from the old patriarchal male. You can't get any teaching. You got to go on the hero's journey. What's the hero's journey?
Realize you were perfect all along.
Realize you were perfect all along.
You are enough.
Not get any help from any patriarchal anybody.
That's the funniest part is we watched like the first 16 minutes of it, and because that's all we could stomach. Before like, let's watch something less shitty like Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. And we like she opens up talking about how Tony Stark couldn't have changed the world if he didn't have billions. Like, and then she talks about her internship to Wakanda, where she had unlimited resources in the world's richest country by about a billion%. Yeah. And then the grant to MIT. Like, wait a minute, you were given literally everything, and you just shat on all those people. Like, the very introduction is her dean explaining to her that, like, we're going to have to kick you out because you keep breaking shit in the lab with this experimental stuff that we didn't give you grant money for. It's like, y'all just trying to keep me small. Y'all want me to be small, have some job in a corner office with people I don't care about. And I'm exaggerating. She's not that. But
just close.
They seriously like, and to their credit, her dean then goes, that's bullshit and you know it.
Yeah, well, but then they have like scenes like this where she starts to self-reflect, and this will come in handy later because I remember about like equivocations in words and the stuff that Jordan Peterson supposedly does.
Leading moment of self-awareness, Riri Williams goes to her NPC boyfriend Xavier and asks this.
So do you think I'm a good person? Never mind.
I like where they're going with this. It might have led to some character development. Unfortunately, it leads to some intersectional postmodern gobbledygook.
Good, bad, words don't really mean anything. It's all depending on who's labeling you.
No offense, but it sounds like that's some fucking commie gobbledygook.
Yeah.
Who cares what people label you? I said to my pedophile friend.
So some of that stuff that Jonathan was posting over Mormon Stories all stemmed from this article that I haven't been able to read because it's behind a paywall over the Atlantic by Helen Lewis, that gal who years ago interviewed Jordan Peterson for GQ. Did you guys remember that whole one where? Oh
yeah, she doesn't get as much shit because it was around the same time of the Kathy Newman one, and the Kathy Newman was
a little bit of
fucking
shit,
wretched. She got some shit, yeah.
Yeah, but Peterson kind of took her to task on certain things about like feminism and all sorts of ideas at that time frame. But here it is. She wrote this this article supposedly about the liberal misinformation bubble about youth gender medicine, and I don't know why or how, but they're allowed to somewhat start admitting that now. So watch out. Like we're gonna have to get back to the thin line between off ramps and gaslighting. But
I want to let Helen Lewis know, like, literally, how does it even affect her? It's literally like less than 1% of the population.
Okay, you have now committed a fallacy. Let's see which fallacy that one.
You flip to your note card.
Flip to my note card. That is a
argument ad populum, but the reverse.
Yeah, the thing is, like, some of these like go against the other ones too. Like ignoring the statistical base rate in favor of a specific. That's the opposite of no true stat, man. Like base rate fallacy is the opposite of no true Scotsman. You hear that? Base rate fallacy, ignoring a statistical base rates, ignoring statistical base rates in favor of a specific. That's the opposite of no true Scotsman, which is which is just basically like you're incapable of understanding the concept of averages. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I guess the No True Scotsman says no, there's no thing out. But usually whenever everybody's arguing that sort of thing, they're usually talking about an average, you know. No, but that's the appeal to popularity, and then that's basically the opposite of that. The who's it really affecting? Actually, I think Colby and RFM even talked about one of it. Who's it really affecting? Who's it really affecting?
That's so fucking lazy. As soon as you say that,
Yep.
it means you don't have an argument.
It's moving the goalpost. It's there's also another one that's very specific to it. Anyway, who gives a shit?
I liked the Flip coined the term when I was asking about a fallacy, and he's like, "You mean fucking lying? the lying fallacy?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that one. That's the one.
The saying things that aren't true fallacy.
Yeah. Anyway, Peterson kind of chides her and says, "Remember when I told you and warned everybody for years about this in the head of curve? Your response was to do everything you could to damage my public reputation." No, Peterson, because now we're on the off-ramping time, and we're on the gaslighting off-ramping time. You're not allowed to remember that. Remember how Jake Tapper is telling us about Biden's the mush brains? Like, she gets to tell us that there's a liberal
Jake Tapper doesn't get a fucking off ramp. Fuck that guy. That guy.
But you think Helen Lewis does?
I'm more willing to give her an off ramp than him, because I can believe that maybe she was retarded enough to buy into this shit, and now she's kind of coming out of it. But Jake Tapper just fucking lied. Like, he is not dumb enough. No, I don't know a person dumb enough to not know that Biden was losing it.
Yeah. Troy says, "I'm really sad about the fall of Pixar. I guess last year was more important than they thought." Well, I've heard a lot of different people pontificate on that, and some of it was because the guy actually had a veto power. And part of the problem with the current day stuff is there's hardly any veto power. They just have to accept and put in everything and roll with whatever ideas people have. And then I heard that a lot of the best animators, the original people, left. But you can also go back to the concepts and ideas of great man theories and all that sorts of stuff. Once again, the Italian elite theory. No, it really is a great man who did all that sorts of stuff. That's fascist. That's fascist. It was the last era was fascism, and now we've got socialism and better movies like Elio. I think that's always funny. I've mentioned it 1,000 times before. Like, why would we accept that we're getting new Beatles next week, and the new Beatles is now like the South Park joke is now Shaniqua, LaFonda, Latifah, and like this is new Beatles. Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Hey, we the Beatles, y'all.
We're getting Beatles next week, written by Ta-Nehisi Coates. Here it comes. Like, well, I think it might not be the same if we don't have John and Paul. Shut up, bigot. Shut up, bigot. But
we ain't no living in a yellow submarine.
I mean, I think that was
I'm not one to say I told you so, Helen Lewis, but I fucking did.
There's no way Pixar can get back to Pixar because it's not the people who did Pixar. There's no way Star Wars can get back to Star Wars because it's not the people who did Star Wars. And even worse than that is it hasn't even been taken over by a new brain, because like you can kind of get that when it was like Alien and that was taken over in Aliens by a second auteur. Like, it's first it was one guy, and then James Cameron took it over, and he was able to write a story with it. Now it's all by committee horseshit.
Well, it's committee horseshit, and it's also a Ship of Theseus problem. Like, if you just take off one part of the Ship of Theseus, like when it needs to be taken off naturally, and then replace it, like 1,000 years, they're all going to be different parts, but it's still going to, like, basically, it's the Ship of Theseus, But that's not what we did. Instead, we, like, got rid of all the old guard in Pixar, like, in a pretty fell swoop. Hired a bunch of new people. It's okay if you take this guy's retiring and we'll hire a new person who can study under the tutelage, and we're roughly the same entity going forward, because we're learning from each other. But partially, you had a bunch of people either get canned or leave, and partially, most of these lefty creative types, like, don't really think they have anything to learn from the giants that came before them. So
yeah, it's fascism to learn from that. So I've heard like a bunch of stuff that the guys over on Film Threat, they were talking about how visually, it's the worst thing that they've ever seen. Like, they do not understand the rule of thirds at
Yeah.
all. They just like put everything right square center in the screen, and everything's got the same mushy colors and the same look, and the bean mouth and all that sorts of stuff. They've done like multiple bean mouth movies now, haven't they? Was the
There was that one. There was Luca. There was Turning Red, or the three big ones.
they're all bean mouth now. Like, I guess that's the thing.
Because they look like fucking Steven Universe.
Yeah,
God, I hate that show.
yeah, which is another big long trans gay allegory thing.
Oh yeah.
It's over. Like, it's gone. There's no getting it back. There's no putting the toothpaste back in the toothpaste bottle. Like this, Pixar's done. Donezo. It's not getting fixed. Disney's done. It's donezo. It's not getting fixed. I actually was just listening to a thing right before this that there was a bunch of studies of the young kids, and this might be one of your Scott Adams study that I could have saved you the money on that. But to young kids, Avatar is higher than Star Wars. To young kids, like all sorts of different
That's
IPs that are pretty shitty are higher ranked than Star Wars. Like, Star Wars has fallen off.
Well, I would rather watch. I don't even really care for Avatar that much, but I'd rather watch it than just about anything in the sequel trilogy.
Yeah.
So I don't blame the kids, you know.
And to young kids coming up, I mean, it didn't like hold its place as legendary status. They could give a shit less. What's the Star Wars thing? That's like only half as cool as Pokemon. Fuck off. But that's that. So this whole thing has stemmed into, I guess, some of the needling stuff at over on the wokeness in the ex-Mormon space, who I was told in the Logical Fallacies podcast, because in that Logical Fallacies podcast, they affirmed to me that the reason they got into logical fallacies is because they're in the truth. No matter. We're into the truth. And when you're into the truth, no matter, you let all voices come to the table. Randy Bell stated all the voices, that's all Duolingo does, is create a space for all the voices to come to the table. That's what it does. And that's not true of the ex-Mormon space at all. Maybe we're trying to add our voices, and we're gossiping our little missiles, but no, it is a complete and total bubble. That's what we've been saying for years. Just a total bubble. It's right square in that little pink bubble there, in that liberal misinformation bubble of Helen Lewis is talking about right there.
Oh
So
yes.
it didn't even exist until, like, just like for years, like left-wing authoritarianism didn't even exist until they finally announced it themselves. And it can't exist until they announce it themselves. And then somehow, some way, some person who is ingratiated into their world is able to say it. Like, it's not true that it's not ridiculous to say maybe that virus came from China until Jon Stewart says it.
I know.
About 3 years after everybody else was saying it.
Yes.
It's not okay to say it. It's not okay to say that maybe men aren't doing such a good time until ABC News says it about 12 years after the fact. It's not okay.
That Atlantic article from 2021 came back across my feed. Oh, it makes me laugh every time I see it. The title is just, "The experts had a bad year, but we still need to trust them."
And that you're not allowed to say that until one of the anointed, as Thomas Sowell calls it, says it. It's so funny, like, how many things in the world just exist, and there's like the whole group of people in that little blue bubble there on that side. For those 4 of you that might be listening, who've been saying some sort of thing all along, and then it's not true until Jon Stewart lets it slip out.
Mm-hmm.
I just heard one. Paul Vanderklay's been covering a pretty good one by a channel. It's like the Stories of Old or something like that, where it talks about some of the liberal movie fantasies, and it was making a pretty good point that in all liberal American Westworld like movies of the past 20-30 years, you're not allowed to be any sort of king or leader unless at some point or another you announce you don't want it. But I don't want it. But I don't want it. You're my queen. I don't want it. You're my queen.
I seem to
That's
remember,
it.
wasn't Aragorn a whole lot more reluctant to be king in the movies than he was in the book?
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure in the book he was just like, yeah, I'm going to be the king once we get.
And that was even pointed out by Vanderclay that no, he wanted it. He's like, no, I'm the king. I'm the rightful king.
I just
And-
listened to a thing with Shane Gillis talking about the Last Jedi, and he pointed out something that is so obvious, and I can't believe I missed it. Which is that, like, because they added so much diversity to Star Wars. There was, women and blacks and Asians and all kinds of diversity, but only on the Rebels. The Empire was just
The Empire State
white
was-
guys. They
except
just-
for the one guy who left, right?
Yeah, the good stormtrooper.
yeah.
good
The one good
stormtrooper.
one was the black guy.
Yeah.
That's how you can tell he was a good guy, because he wasn't white.
There was one female stormtrooper, the Brienne of Tarth lady, that really tall lady.
Yeah, but she
Wasn't she
always-
white though?
she wore a mask.
Yeah,
though.
she's white. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember like when in episode, I forget the order, 7, it was like, this is a big scary person coming, and then it was like, nope.
Yeah, that sucked. Well, then they shot her with a blaster and it just like bounced off. I was like, hold on a sec. Do you guys cut more of that material? Because like this is a game changer right here.
But then that was also the same with like the big guy who looked like he was supposed to be the big scary person in episode 7. Who was
Oh,
that?
Snoke.
Snoke, yeah.
Fucking-
Big scary. Nope. Nope.
Fucking Ryan Johnson puts him in a Hugh Hefner robe and he just slaughters him immediately. He's this big bad. We're like, oh boy, what's gonna happen? What cool shit's he get? Oh fuck, okay. Well, you did subvert our expectations, buddy. You sure okay. Thanks.
I still love that Rich Evans movie, where he's sitting like subverted expectations, and he's just sitting at a table, and they pull out a wine glass, and then they pour the wine just next to the glass instead of into the glass, and then he goes, hey, 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 like created by Ryan Johnson. Anyway, this sort of stuff, and maybe kind of a chit chat or talking to Delin, is little bits of how that's all kind of coming across and posting, saying, hey, maybe you guys have been in the bubble, maybe, and John Lynn said, but empathy, and that door closed right up.
Empathy.
But empathy. I have a kid who empathy.
Matt Damon.
Matt Damon, empathy. Yeah.
Empathy.
Anyway, there's been a bunch of stuff. Like, I wonder like how much in that Iron Dome bubble that Delin lives in, because I don't know if he was able to read the Atlantic article. He says he subscribes to that. I know he says it, but like there's been a lot of hard hits in the past year or two, and Brett and Heather covered a lot of them on their episode this week. I won't know because they covered it for like a half hour, but maybe I'll talk about some of them. But man, the stuff's been taken in the Supreme Court just recently. They said that parents can 100% opt out of those trans ideology books from their schools, and it is exactly the same as pushing a religious ideology on people.
Who was like against? I don't understand it at all. Like it wasn't even a you can't teach this in school. It was a I don't have to teach my kids this in school. Yes, you do.
Yes, you do. You must watch this. But so much of the argument about it is like how you used to see people argue for critical race theory stuff, and you tell them like this is anti-liberal and it's also anti-empiricism. Like it's anti-empirical truth. It's anti-logical fallacies because that's white man's tools. And you'd start telling it to people, and they would apologize for it, not really realizing that if you had Kimberly Crenshaw right there with you, she would agree with you and not them who are making the apology for it if she was being honest.
That was it reminds me of that. You remember the debate between Vosch and Thomas Bogardus?
Yeah.
I don't think
the same thing. Bosch had no idea what he was arguing for.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I don't think Thomas Bogardus is a pretty smart guy. I don't think he intentionally did this, but he baited Vosch into like his liberalism and his postmodern or his leftism and postmodernism just butting heads when he asked him that question about water. Like, would you agree that like water is objectively what, like there's an objective thing, water, and you can see Vosch is like trust the science brain on this side being like, yes, I believe in objective science. And then his postmodern thing, like, nope, nothing is true. Nothing can be objectively true. And then he goes, some people call it aqua.
Oh yeah.
But I saw Vosch actually kind of admit to it, because he went into one of the things that James Lindsay would always say is critical race theorists won't debate you. And they'd always say, yes, we would too debate you. And Vosch, I'll take the debate. And they'd go in and he'd translate it to liberalese. It wasn't the critical race theory. He was translating it to what they don't believe. And so then when you hold their feet to the fire of saying like, no, these guys do not believe, like in their very writings, they do not believe in hard science. They do not believe in Western ways of thinking. They do not believe in empiricism. They do not believe in, if you tried to start coming at them for their logical fallacies, they would tell you that you were being racist. And no, they wouldn't. No, they wouldn't. Yes, they would. And when you show it to them painstakingly, I saw Vosch just a little bit kind of start saying, well, I don't like that. Well, I don't like that.
You Western-centric bigot.
Yeah. It was wild. But anyway, damn it. I thought I had some... here it is. So they talked about the Leah Thomas thing. Leah Thomas, the swimmer, under Title IX, that university had to apologize and return all of the awards that or
they rescinded everything.
They rescinded everything
that Leah won.
Yeah.
William.
Yeah. And then you had the Schellenberger and the WPATH stuff, the Cass report stuff, all those different countries backing off of these sort of things, the Supreme Court rulings about the states are able to ban certain types of underage medicalization, the Supreme Court ruling about the books, the UK Supreme Court ruling about women being able to say that their spaces don't include women with penises. You know, that sorts of stuff.
Is this what it took for us to understand freedom of association? Like, is this what had to happen?
I think. I don't know. I don't know why it all had to happen. Like, why did everybody go like balls crazy? Just because like empathy just trumped everything, and you didn't. But I guess it makes you lose empathy for other people because you don't have to have empathy for the women that you're fucking over for Title IX, that Title IX was created for.
We're the business owners. I'm like, I feel like if a dude came to Idaho Falls and started up a diner called the Black Guys Diner, and he just employed black guys, he's like, we have black guys that work the kitchen and do this. I'd be like, yeah, that's fine. I don't care. It's your fucking business. You can employ who you want. And if somebody were to tell me that's discrimination, I'd say, well, yeah, it is, but it's his business. I don't fucking care. And if you were to freak out and do a lawsuit over it, people would probably see just how retarded it was. But if it were white, on the other hand, they wouldn't be able to see how retarded it was. And so maybe we needed this whole transgender insanity to like jog us to, oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
I could totally see that. Like, it's like stuff's got to be stress tested, but why did it take 10 years to do it all? But at the same time, there's still so many people, like with all these things, that they're just like those Japanese fighters that didn't realize World War II ended for 20 years after. You know, there's totally all sorts of wokies and normies who don't know what time it is on all this sorts of stuff. They don't know that the argument's lost.
Sorry, go on.
No, I just saw we saw some people kind of putting around something by Ezra Klein, and part of it, what Ezra Klein does is the Scott Adams thing of talking past the cell. And when he's talking past the cell, he says why we've lost the debate against the transgender thing. Like he's talking past the cell that it's lost. You know what I mean? Like it's already lost.
Talking past this, I need to remember that phrase for my wife because she does that.
She talks past
the sale. Yeah. She fucking.
It's like, so what are we gonna get at Red Lobsters when we get there? And you're like, but we didn't wait. You talked past the sale on we're going to Red Lobsters. You know what I mean?
I was thinking something different.
Oh,
I was thinking it was she sold me on something, and then and then kept trying to sell me on it. Like,
Oh.
Like, hey, do you think it'd be all right if I get this this back support thing for my office chair? And I'm like, yeah, sure. I just think it'd be really good because like, I have back pain. I'm like, yeah, go ahead and get it. I understand why. Like
that's called the overproofing fallacy.
Yeah, it'd be really nice because I could get and finally I have to be like, you already. You know what? No, not anymore. I'm not okay with it anymore. You talked me out of it. You had me. You should have stopped.
The overproofing fallacy. If you have too much logic and too many descriptions, you will lose because I don't know. No, yeah, the actual talking past the sale is you sneak in the assumption already in the question or in something that you're saying that talks past. Like that, you're already agreeing to something else.
Okay, like the sale, SAIL.
Yeah, no, SALE.
Okay.
Talk past the sale. It's like buying a car or something like that, and I tell you something like, you're gonna want the big old tires, and you're gonna want these sorts of things, and so go over to this store over here and get those tires for this. And I don't even talk about selling the car to you. I'm already talking to you about your next steps.
No, I understand it. It's like when I go to a bar and I'm looking for a chick and I go up to her and I say, hey, am I going to come on your tits or in your mouth?
Exactly. That's exactly it. I should have put it in a sexual connotation and your wife should do that too. She should learn that. Like, well, but look, if I get this thing, it will have all these logical purposes, but what will happen is a much more sex will actually happen to you. That's talking.
Troy, the fallacy. They're like PH.
The fallacy. Yeah. Brett Weinstein and Hiller.
I found, by the way, while we were talking about Elio, I was looking for my favorite tweet about it. And it was this guy who said, kind of a blockbuster here. Pixar made a movie about a gay 11-year-old at test screening. Not a single viewer raised their hand to recommend it. Gay Latino director fired. America Ferrera quit because of this. Movie reworked and flopped. And their reply to that was, shocking that the underlying theme of I'm 11, have no idea what sex is yet, but I'm 100% confident that I like dick didn't resonate with regular people just trying to have some fun at the movie with their kids.
But they need that story. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Like I daydream of a world where we could swap out the LGBTQ activist world for the Mormon activist world, so that like imagine they had that much power in Hollywood and we got to see them slip in Mormonism the same way that these guys have been slipping in LGBTQ stuff all these years. Like I want to see a world where I'm watching the Julia Childs episode and and then some missionaries also knock on her door and they stop and take 2 episodes to have her go through the discussions, and then at the end she goes, oh, I'm going to get baptized but I have to go to London, and then it's like left later to discuss in the chat rooms like, did you really actually meet some missionaries and think about getting baptized? Well, she could have that could have been part of her story, but we'll get back to the rest of the Julia Child story now. We just had to go off onto that for an episode or 2. Like that's the LGBTQ world taking over Hollywood has been exactly that. If the Mormons were swapped for their place, we'd have to stop for fan fiction that everybody almost got baptized at some point or another.
And all the Exmormons would notice it. They'd know, this is bullshit. They're just worming their shit, their ideology into all of our art. Why can't they just stay out and be like, yeah, sucks, doesn't it?
Yeah, and all the gaslighting Mormons, and it would be like, I just thought it was a pretty good story. I kind of didn't notice the Mormon-y part of it. I mean, I just watched stuff, and I guess, oh yeah, there's missionaries. I mean, that stuff just kind of blows past me nowadays. I just don't even notice that part. But yeah, I guess that did happen in there. But is that Mormon? Is that really a Mormon thing? I don't know if that's Mormon.
Define Mormon things.
I don't think that's Mormon. That's just part of life. Part of life is missionaries come over.
Oh, I'm sorry. Missionaries make up this % of the population. You don't think they
Are
deserve
you saying missionaries
representation?
don't exist? Are you saying missionaries don't exist in movies? Is that what you're telling us?
We're Mormons and we want the right to exist.
I mean, it's okay. I mean, sure, we have mandates in Mormon Hollywood that you have to have a little bit of Mormonism to be considered for an award. But I think this was going to be part of the story anyway.
Well, it's because
I think it was going to be like this probably happened.
we live in an oppressive Mormon phobic society, and your philanderer in chief fucking decided that we can't have special rights, and we're really mad about it.
Oh man, and did you see that crowd voted? They didn't like the episode of the Mormons. Anti-Mormonism.
Yeah.
Anti-Mormon. They didn't like the Mormon episode.
Sound like Cardin Ellis.
They didn't like the Mormon episode. Anti-Mormonism. Yeah.
A new episode of Last of Us came out, and one of the characters was a Mormon. Like, it showed him in his temple clothes and shit, and that wasn't in the game. That wasn't in the game at all. Like, is that a problem?
Yeah.
Sorry, I carried the joke on too long.
No, I think that joke can go on forever. I think we could actually make. I used to joke. You know how they had clean flicks? I wanted to make dirty flicks, which was like we take G-rated movies and just add F words for no reason.
No, it exists. It's called Pixar.
Oh yeah. Well, I didn't want to make it all lame and gay. Put a chicken in and make it lame and gay. I just want random, totally unnecessary like F words, and it's got to be like tastefully done. It can't be like stupid. It's like you're just like watching, you're watching Little Mermaid or something, and she's like, "Look at this fucking fork, isn't it great?" And that's the only thing that's added in the whole entire.
He's watching Lion King and Mufasa's fall to his death, and Simba's like, "Fuck!
fuck me," and that's it. That's it. Like, no, it's tastefully done.
Scar whispers in his ear, "I killed your bitch ass father."
Artistically done. That's I'm gonna accept both of those entries. But if we add one more, even if it's good, we're getting a little bit too LGBT people in all movies ever with it. We got to be tasteful here. That's one of the things I think is funny about that is like if activists hadn't been such ding dong honkies and do it to every single IP, every single one of them. I honestly think there could be a world where they did incept this all a little bit better and a little bit smoother and a little bit like we could have had the last 10 years where they did 5% of this and nobody'd be none the wiser, and they probably would have achieved their goals better.
Well, I remember on my mission, I would do a lot of sort of artsy things to try to pass the time because missions suck ass. So I was like, I'm gonna try to write a story, and I start writing this story, and I get the whole thing mapped out in my head. It was getting pretty intricate, and the main character was actually a girl, and I was like, maybe it was a little bit of a foreshadowing of me leaving the church because like the main villain was called the Prophet, and like it was this real staunch religious thing, and I was like, oh, it'd be kind of interesting. I could make the main character gay, and that could be a thing that they don't like, and it could be like a thing of tension. And then I remember like that was in like 2010 or 12, something like around that part. And then I get home and I'm like, maybe I should write more of this. It'll be fun. And then I'm like looking around me and everything's gay. I can't do the gay thing. Everyone else is doing it. It's just lame now.
Yeah. Let's just listen to a little bit of this. A little bit.
Recent wins in gender ideology space. So, here back to my screen. We talked about this back in March of 2024, the WPATH files, which our friend Mia Hughes, working assisted by Michael Schellenberger, put together.
Oh, I couldn't pass up that Risto mentioned that they removed coffee from all movies in our Mormon Hollywood.
We'd be going through a Supreme Court decision right now where parents would have to opt their kids out of the first vision thing, and Mormons would be like, "You don't want to learn about the first vision." Like, no, they don't have to. Okay.
No.
Together, the pseudoscientific surgical and hormonal experiments on children, adolescents, and vulnerable adults, wherein Schellenberger was approached with a ton of files from WPATH, which was at that point. Well, here we go. I'll just read the executive summary. The World Professional Association for Transgender Health, WPATH, enjoys the reputation of being the leading scientific and medical organization devoted to transgender healthcare. WPATH is globally recognized as being at the forefront of gender medicine. However, throughout this report, we will show that the opposite is true. Newly released files from WPATH's internal messaging forum, as well as a leaked internal panel discussion, demonstrate that the world-leading transgender healthcare group is neither scientific nor advocating for ethical medical care. These internal communications reveal that WPATH advocates for many arbitrary medical practices, including hormonal and surgical experimentation on minors and vulnerable adults. Its approach to medicine is consumer-driven and pseudoscientific, and its members appear to be engaged in political activism, not science.
political activism, not science.
Hey, you know, I like Heather Haying a lot, but do you ever wonder if like that voice she does is fake?
Like she's got NPR voice.
She's got NPR voice and she makes it really smoky, and it almost sounds to me like she's intentionally speaking quieter than she has to. And I don't know. I'm just.
I think
But-
she's getting in your head in a hot way. Like, what's this NPR voice, man?
Give me some Heather Haying ASMR.
Inform me, baby.
Would you like some of my sweaty balls? And that's one of the better Saturday Night Live episodes ever.
Oh
Was it?
man, classic stuff. Man,
million
that
years
show was
might
good
be-
for a little while.
Yeah.
where you start the clock on humans, and you're talking about 500 times that distance back.
Right.
But to exclude the one thing that actually is unambiguous and for which there are no intermediate examples, that looks to be intentional, and that means
Yes,
it's
it
sophistry,
does.
which is
Yes.
designed to be a powerful argument, not a true argument.
Yes. Okay, just one more. One.
Oh wait, they were talking about people in the trans world making powerful arguments, not true arguments. I don't remember which one it was, but it doesn't matter because we'll figure out logical fallacies in just a minute.
More example actually from this week of places where it seems like the world is waking up, and this is more nuanced. It's not as straightforward. The UK Supreme Court was specifically weighing in on do man and woman, do male and female refer to biological sex, or is it something more woo? And they're like, nah, it's biological sex. The Supreme Court of the United States this week, on June 27th of this week, wrote their opinion on Mahmoud versus Taylor, which was broadly speaking about a lot of transgender ideology and some same-sex marriage ideology as well in schools, in a public school district in which a family or families, actually, I don't remember all the specifics of the case, tried to opt out and weren't allowed to, and said, you know what, this is actually, it goes against our freedom of religion. So let's just share a little bit from this ruling, this opinion that was presented this week by the U.S. Supreme Court. So first we have the Board of Education, this is just from right up top in the opinion. The Board of Education of Montgomery County, Maryland, has introduced a variety of LGBTQ plus inclusive storybooks into the elementary school curriculum. These books and associated educational instructions provided to teachers are designed to disrupt children's thinking about sexuality and gender. Disrupt being in quotes means that's the board's language, right? The board has told parents that it will not give them notice when the books are going to be used, and that their children's attendance during these periods is mandatory. A group of parents from diverse religious backgrounds sued to enjoin those policies. They assert that the new curriculum, combined with the board's decision to deny opt-outs, impermissibly burdens their religious exercise. Before I share some of what the opinion said, let me share the dissent.
You want to know what's
the
funny
beginning of
about
the
this?
dissent, which was it was a
What's
6-3
that?
opinion,
Oh,
a 6-3 ruling,
what's
and the
that?
dissent was Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson, as you might imagine.
The funniest part about this whole Supreme Court ruling is the names. Tamir Mahmoud. You're like, you guys finally got brought to the, to the Supreme Court because it's in all likelihood a brown guy. A Muslim.
Yeah,
It's
just like nobody cared about what was happening at colleges until you could point out that it was Asians.
Well, Islam is a terrifying religion to me,
Yeah,
but Muslims don't take shit. That's for sure.
yeah.
You start teaching their kid about gay shit, and they'll throw bricks at you.
No. Somebody said this week that I think it was in Latter-day Lobster. Somebody pointed at something that said, Pew poll says that Muslims are more accepting of the LGBTQ
Shut
than
the
evangelicals.
Fuck off.
Yeah,
What is that data mining?
I'm
Holy-
curious how
data
the
mining
hell
fallacy.
That's such
what they
horseshit.
had to do to get that number. It's like that's just no fucking
They
way.
don't pee hack in academia. That's a logical fallacy. That's the fallacy of you think academia could be wrong.
We mapped
That's not
60 data points of the 6 million data points that we have available, and they all seemed a lot more accepting.
Yeah.
Public schools, they write, this court has said, are at once the symbol of our democracy and the most pervasive means for promoting our common destiny. Edwards versus Aguillard, 1987. Oh, that's from the quote. They offer to children of all faiths and backgrounds an education and opportunity to practice living in our multicultural society. That experience is critical to our nation's civic vitality. Yet it will become a mere memory if children must be insulated from exposure to ideas and concepts that may conflict with their parents' religious beliefs. Today's ruling ushers in that new reality. Casting aside long-standing precedent, the court invents a constitutional right to avoid exposure to subtle themes contrary to the religious principles that parents wish to instill in their children. Exposing students to the message that LGBTQ people exist and that their loved ones may celebrate their marriages and life events, the majority says, is enough to trigger the most demanding form of judicial scrutiny. That's the dissent. That's just the very beginning of the dissent. But on page 27 of the opinion, obviously we're fairly deep into the opinion here, they write, we disagree with the dissent's deliberately blinkered view that these storybooks and related instruction merely expose students to the message that LGBTQ people exist and teach them to treat others with kindness. In making this argument, the dissent ignores what anyone who reads these books can readily see. It ignores the messages that the authors plainly intended to convey. And what is perhaps most telling, it ignores the board's stated reasons for inserting these books into the curriculum and much of the instructions it gives to teachers. Only by airbrushing the record can the dissent claim that the books and instruction are just about exposure and kindness. And just two more things. Let me just share some of the examples that, in their opinion, the majority, the 6 justices that came down on the side of the majority here, cite as evidence in favor of their opinion. This is with regard to how the school board has suggested that teachers respond if students ask questions of the text being presented. They say, if a child says he can't be a boy if he was born a girl, the teacher is urged to respond, that comment is hurtful. If a child asks, what's transgender? It is suggested that the teacher answer, when we're born, people make a guess about our gender. Sometimes they're right, and sometimes they're wrong.
Sometimes, even if they were being
And then finally,
honest, like even
from
if
page
that
24
was
of the opinion, the book Born.
that's like even if it was, if I accept all their ideology, the right verbiage would be nearly always they're totally right.
Yeah.
We can basically disregard all of the times they're wrong because it's a vanishingly small number.
Mhm.
Born Ready, which is one of the books that the board is reading to elementary, so the schools are reading to elementary school children, and the parents are not allowed to either know in advance when it's going to happen or opt their children out. The book Born Ready presents similar ideas in an even less veiled manner. The book follows the story of Penelope, an apparently biological female who asserts, I am a boy. Not only does the story convey the message that Penelope is a boy simply because that is what she chooses to be, but it slyly conveys a positive message about transgender medical procedures. Penelope says the following to her mother. I love you, Mama, but I don't want to be you. I want to be Papa. I don't want tomorrow to come because tomorrow I'll look like you. Please help me, Mama. Help me to be a boy. That is from a book that, until this ruling from the Supreme Court that came out this week, was being read to elementary school children without notice given to their parents and without their parents being able to opt out. And the dissent, the claim is, children will no longer be exposed to ideas that are worthy of a diverse country that we all live in. This is nuttery. This is denial of biological reality and total.
Those were the subjects that we were offering up. What's his name? Christian, who told us that he could, I guess, Socratic method talk us into seeing why we are incorrect about this stuff. But we suggested he come on and do it. Yeah. This is a long list of stuff, but you wonder if people on that side of the bubble even know what's going on. Right before we get into the fallacy stuff, I just wanted to hit one more thing. Peterson this week put out a really good episode on Snow White. I think he's back in full form on that episode. Really good stuff. I was also told in the RFM episode that Peterson has fallen out. And the way you can notice, because Jacob Hansen said so, and that's not a logical fallacy.
I mean, he's never stopped being good at talking about stories.
Yeah.
He never stopped being good at talking about feminism and
stuff he's good at.
A lot of that shit. Like he gets wonky when he talks about theism because he's talking to people who speak a different language. It's most apparent in his discussion with Richard Dawkins, where poor Alex O'Connor is sitting there in the middle, desperately trying to translate the two people who are speaking entirely different languages.
Here's J.K. Rowling saying, attention all men telling me I look like a trans woman. I'm sensing that it isn't meant as a compliment. In fact, the implication seems to be that trans women look male or odd or ugly. This is appallingly transphobic, and I'll thank you to take your bigotry off my timeline. It's J.K. Rowling. She also went after sex work this week. Or I think that was in the past, but it just got repopularized.
Yeah, I don't know when it was, but that was awesome. But this is like anytime I get into one of these arguments online, and invariably, there's always somebody in the comment section who will call me gay. Somebody from the empathy side being like, sounds like you really want to suck cock. And I was like, yep, I do. Now let's talk about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like cock.
I like how they're really, really, really concerned about the housing costs and how hard it is for ordinary people to find housing. But also, you live in your mom's basement. Oh yeah, well, okay. I guess
a house costs $700,000. I could be making $100,000 a year, and that's not enough nowadays.
That used to be just a boomer conservative talking point. The mom's base, and it was annoying then too, because you're like, okay, that's an ad hominem. You're attacking the arguer instead of the argument. Thank you very much. And they and it was always dumb. It was always like, oh, you don't actually have an argument. It's just like it's just less than 1% of the population. Why do you care? How does this affect you? No, you're not addressing the argument. Address it now. And now, lefties are co-opting the shittiest right-wing argument ever. And just be like, I bet you're just an incel that lives in your mom's basement.
Yeah, you can't have sex with women. Like, so that's what gives us value. Is that what gives us value?
Feminists online have like three insults, and they all involve your dick. So either you have a tiny pee-pee, you can't have sex with women, or even if you are having sex with women, there's no way you could satisfy them.
Yeah. There was another one too that I was thinking about. The thing, I lost it. But there is another one where
you're worse than a rapist.
No, I'm thinking of another one where they're calling you a name that supposedly in their world is a good thing. Like you're gay or something like that. You're probably I brought this up forever ago and said it to somebody, and they're acting like it's crazy. But do you know how they all say that every single Republican ever who has ever done any sort of anything bad is a closeted gay guy?
Oh yeah.
I said, well, okay, but ergo factor fallacy sum. You're telling me that probably every bad person in this world is a gay person. They just haven't announced that. So should we be afraid of all gay people? Like, if we could abort, like Steve always says, like if we could abort stuff. So should we abort all gay people? Because if any of them get born and try to hide it, they're everything bad. Like everything bad that's in this world are those ones who weren't able to accept their gayness. That's what we're supposed to like take from that. Can there be any straight people who are actually bad, or are they all just secretly gay?
It's always funny when one argument that they have defeats a different one. It's like whenever I'll see them bring up some statistic where they'll be like, "Did you know that less than 1% of all pedophiles are LGBTQ, and that means that really the big problem is straight white men." It's like, first of all, that's not what it means. But also, weren't you just bitching about like Catholic priests diddling kids all the time the other day? That might kind of offset your 1% statistic there. Are you calling those dudes straight?
Yeah. Last little bit here before we get to the fallacy.
You actually don't need to have any evidence that Joseph Smith had sex with his secret child brides to think it was obviously wrong for him to secretly marry children, though evidence exists. You don't need any evidence at all to just say child brides? Absolutely not. It's a very healthy impulse to run when you hear child brides. Every cult leader ends up having as many sexual partners as they want, regardless of whether consent is given. Children often get impacted in this. The pattern is textbook. Marriage between children and adults is wrong, and you would never hear about old men marrying children in another church and think, maybe there was a really good reason for it. You don't have to do it with Mormonism just because you are raised in it and believers don't accept your decision. The lowest bar imaginable for sussing out whether an organization is worth giving your time and money to is probably child brides. What's worse than that? God didn't even explain why it had to look exactly like the most evil thing ever that everyone else who started a religion also did. Just a coincidence, of course, it was a totally different thing when Mormon leaders did it. So like what? God wants you to justify something that looks exactly like the abuse of children, and you're righteous if you can do that, and refusing to justify it makes you bad? I can't think of a less inspiring, more morally bankrupt deity.
That is one of my favorite D-Vase TikToks ever.
Yeah, you just post other people's TikToks up.
He's a really thoughtful guy with a brave moral stance.
So here's the problem, Kobe Radish and you guys. I don't really necessarily disagree with her, but you can count logical fallacies in there. You know, the way she frames it and the way she justifies it, the way she says it, does not follow. You know, it's every single thing. It begs the question. It assumes certain things, which brings up this post that we commented on. We were hoping maybe we'll try to talk to this guy. I don't even know who he is. Jonathan pointed it out to us, and I tried to comment on him. This Josh N dude on Twitter, and he says this thing: woke Exmo leaves Mormonism because in the 1800s, Joseph Smith was sealed to a 14-year-old girl who remained with her parents and never had a sexual relationship with her. When you read that, my eyes are going.
Okay. Leaves Mormonism because in the 1800s, Joseph Smith was sealed to a 14-year-old girl who remained with her parents and never had a sexual relationship with him. I don't totally buy that, buddy, but I get what you're saying.
That's their framing.
Embraces queer theory, grandfathered by a man who, in the 1970s, liked to fly to Tunisia and rape little African boys at night in a graveyard. Also taught their children taught that their children were sexual creatures from birth and signed a petition in 1977 to legalize sex with 13-year-olds. Is that Foucault he's talking about?
Foucault, and all of that is true of Foucault.
I didn't know about the Tunisia thing. That's
know about the Tunisia rape?
No, I didn't. The church ended.
In fact, I think if you go read all of Foucault, knowing about the Tunisia rape, you can basically kind of say, like, how many words would you need and kind of angles to make the Tunisia rape okay? Like, so read all 11, 12, 13 books of Foucault and think he's getting at, he wants Tunisia rape to be okay.
Well, you would probably start by explaining how much better the world was when parents would just bang each other right in front of their kids so they could see.
Where he talks about the look up the curdled milk story of him, where he talks about a guy just kind of plays a curdled milk game and gets his sperm on a young underage woman in an old. It's just a game, man. It's just a game. It's just, who's to say? People just call that games in old towns in France all the time, man.
You can Michel Foucault as portrayed by Christopher Walken. It's just a game. You know what else is it? The church ended polygamy, a consensual practice, kinda. But queer theorists built off Foucault's sexual philosophies, which are revered and taught in gender and queer studies departments across academia to this day. And you think you're exiting a cult, do you? And then we got Chris saying, I'm an ex-Mormon, but Bill Reel put out a challenge for anyone to justify Joseph's polyamory for a call-in, like I said that, for a call-in show, and I volunteered using Foucault, McClellan, and Petrie. The call-in show was Wednesday a.m., and I couldn't for work, and my comments on Facebook were ignored.
Yeah, but I mean, I was going to try to talk to him because Jonathan was saying we should try to talk to him and get him on to bring up the stuff. But who knows how much he knows about Foucault or not. He's obviously got his framing for Mormonism, but I think that's kind of funny to bring that up, what you were saying about that, because he's trying to frame that as positively as he can, right? Mm-hmm. And this happened. Cool. See Michael Siddar calling out, but he says one thing thoughtful saints blocks a post that discusses how queer theory is used to destroy. This got blocked, but I don't think it got blocked because of the queer theory stuff. I think it got blocked because it does some admittance of what Joseph Smith did.
It must have.
Yeah.
Josh N is pretty cool from what I've seen. I've had some interactions with him on Twitter, but I haven't been active on Twitter in fucking forever. So.
Yeah, ridiculous to block that. I think Jacob wasn't down with it and might have unblocked it or something. But they shoot themselves in the foot. But he makes the point, which I think kind of comes all the way back around to why the logical fallacy episode of RFM and Colby Reddish irritates me so much, because as we've been pointing at and leaning at, working on our way up here, is that there ain't a logical fallacy that you guys won't employ to apologize for the LGBTQ community. Maybe not the LGBT and the Q, but like when it gets to that sort of stuff, and it's one of the reasons why it's apt. It is not a red herring, which is a fallacy. It is not a red herring for Jacob to say, if we're going to debate Mormonism, we also should debate queer theory, because if you guys are the ones making a point that how you get to the conclusions matters, we need to see where you will be hardcore honest, or if you will pull the same shit for the stuff that binds and blinds you to your group. Simple as that. And you're the ones making the argument that the method is important over the finality of it and that sort of deal. If that's the case, we need to test you out in a place where you will be an apologist for something.
You hit the ends justify the means argument. Okay, cool. Maybe. Let's see how bad it is. What are the means? Michel Foucault. Oh, God. Okay. Let's try. Can we do it? Is there anyone less rapey?
Yeah, it's just that simple. But to give an apologetic for both sides of it, and this is one of the things that irritates me about logical fallacies and all that sorts of stuff. And RFM and Bill Reel are the ones pushing so hard that if people are doing this, they are necessarily doing it from a place of deceptiveness, or they are necessarily purposefully doing every single logical fallacy that they're doing in an attempt to dupe the accuser. No, people are perfectly capable, in fact, in most cases, are likely fully believing that their logical fallacy is proper logic or makes sense to them or something like that. But there are certain cases, because like they started out so hard with the Mott and Bailey fallacy. If you get hard into Marxism, I mean, I guess we into that. That is not, Mott and Bailey is not a fallacy in Marxism. It is a tactic. It is a tactic that they write down purposefully to do. Like they're talking about critical thinking, and this has been one of the things we've been on about forever and telling people. When you get to like literary criticism or critical theory, you've done a thing that they say in Marxism and that sort of world of those activists, that they're using the same vocabulary but different dictionary. Like when you say critical theory, I see nuance, and all these people say, you gotta be critical thinker, gotta be critical thinker. And then they go into these other worlds where they don't realize that people have jumped, they've done an equivocation of a meaning. Look up critical theory on Wikipedia yourselves and see that it is not critical consciousness, the thing that is wokeness. We should read what Jonathan Streeter, because somebody asked him what is wokeness, and Jonathan Streeter gave a description of it. That critical consciousness, that word critical, isn't just critical thinking of like a liberal empirical mind. That is a Marxist switcheroo of people who purposefully do Mott and Bailey's with words. They do purposeful equivocations.
It is a perfect example of Orwellian language.
Yes, and not accidental.
Yeah, no,
you got
very,
go on.
Very deliberate.
You got Colby Reddish in the chat there.
For real?
Mm-hmm.
Well, hi there, Colby. We are here giving criticism. You should back up and listen to some of it. Maybe you've been listening, but we are going to go to the episode that you guys just did last week. If I can pull it up here.
It reminds me of the same terms, different dictionary thing. Reminds me of a club I started once where we just like ran around town and we would just like grab women's asses and stuff like that. And the name of the club was the Food for Poor Hungry Children Club.
I thought it was the Gentleman's Club.
That would have been a better joke. And anytime somebody criticized me, I'd be like, "We're gentlemen. We feed poor hungry. You're against the Food for Poor Hungry Children's Club?"
We're the women's independence. We're the women's suffrage movement.
So the Mott and Bailey tactic, over the fallacy, because it can totally be a fallacy too, which is a little bit like moving the goalposts and all that sorts of stuff. But like I said, same dictionary, or same vocabulary, different dictionary with the Marxist thinkers and all that sorts of stuff. But when we get into this stuff, as I was saying, I just highly disagree that logical fallacies always necessarily mean people are being purposefully deceptive. Maybe it's just like an error or something like that. And they'd probably say that we didn't necessarily say it was like that, but you guys did bring that up. But at the same time, if it were to be a deceptive thing, if I catch some logical fallacies here, are you guys being deceptive? Because there's some logical fallacies in here. I hate to point that out. No, I don't. So, well, one of them right off the bat. I mean, because I don't know if I have like good clips for this thing all the way through, although I have some notes. But here we'll go for a second.
Did you see Colby's comment?
What's that? No, I'm not. I'm on the YouTube screen.
He said, "What a weird level of projection. Give me one fallacy you've seen from me on LGBT issues." I've also corrected you about.
You haven't even talked about LGBT issues. You avoid it and you dodge it entirely. That's what we were saying, that you need to bring up the discussion and show that you're capable of getting through it. But I will bring up some fallacies that you have on this fallacy episode. In fact, the whole thing starts out with the poisoning of the whale. As soon as you guys poison the whale, can we just disregard all of it because you poisoned the whale? You guys say Mormonism is a logical, Mormon thinking is a logical fallacy in itself. But then you guys always say, well, let me make the case later. But that's what Jacob Hansen does. He does an ad hominem, then he makes the case afterwards. And you guys justify that for yourselves, and you don't do it for him. The whole thing drives me nuts about how you don't see that you are doing it in your own way.
It's the mentality of you can, what is it? You can prosecute a ham sandwich. Yeah. That was kind of in the Skeptic's Guide. He talks about the fallacy. And And he basically said, if you get too caught up in this shit, you can just kind of make a fallacy out of literally anything and then just disregard the conclusions because of that.
Well, not only that. So, Colby, you always bring up the argument from consequence is a logical fallacy. Then you get asked by Risto, who is not an ex-Mormon, he's always kind of trolling you guys when he asks those questions. Why does truth matter? And you give an argument from consequence. Because it's good, because it'll make you have a better life or something. Sort of like you just can't even get, like, I think most moral truth technically are logical fallacy. They beg the question. They're circular. Like, truth is good because truth is good, or it's good because it's going to help you survive and thrive. Argument from consequence or begging the question.
Well, that's basically what an axiom is, isn't it?
Yes.
Something that's self-justifying.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening. This is Radio Free Mormon. Welcome to another episode. Today is June 28, 2025. This is episode 405. The title is Mormon Thinking Errors, or Thinking Errors Mormon Style. These things go through a lot of permutations as far as the titles go between their inception and the recording, and this is also the case here. Radio Free Mormon being joined by my friends to talk about Mormon
thinking errors, or, I mean, you're going to say, look, when Mormons do it or something like that, but they're human thinking errors. And that's kind of like one of the problems, like, things that always come up that are like cosmic problems that people attribute to Mormonism, but it's just something cosmic. It would be in any institution, anywhere. These logical fallacies aren't just Mormon. They're in any sort of world where people bind and blind themselves together over a moral subject.
and thinking errors. Randall Bell, Dr. Randall Bell, who's made a ton of thinking errors in his life, so he's an expert. And Colby Reddish, Esquire. Ditto for him.
Ditto.
How are you doing, Colby?
I'm doing well this morning, making one of those thinking errors early this morning.
Yeah, saying yes when I asked you to come on the show to talk about thinking errors. Dr. Bell, how are you?
I am A-OK, thanks.
That looks like a new and spacious background you have.
I just moved, so I don't have pictures on the wall yet.
Okay, well, I can help with that if you want. I like early Marvel.
I'm in.
Okay, well, Dr. Bell, can you give us a 30-second thumbnail of yourself, and then Colby, the same for you?
Oh, sure. I am Randall Bell or Randy Bell, whatever.
That would be way too long to listen to all of it. I should have like better notes on this stuff. Jared, you watched the whole thing, right?
I actually only got to, like, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes of it.
Did you get to the part where they talked about you and Jacob?
Yeah, they use that as an example of a straw man, which was a little wild to me.
Well, they said that you guys strawman them and saying that they claimed it was justified or something like that. But,
yeah, I don't know. I can't remember exactly what was said. I definitely don't think that they were claiming it was justified, but I seem to remember RFM saying that, like, the Mormons started it, and it was kind of just because they used the word extermination, because Sidney Rigdon was just like, well, if anybody if anybody attacks us, then we'll attack them. If anybody exterminates us, we'll exterminate them. And I was like, well, that's nothing. He just used the same word. He's saying we will act in self-defense. That seems pretty reasonable. I was totally on board. And they kind of talked about, Kobe's going. See you, Kobe. He's got to put his kids down. He's not, like, running away. But
all right.
But they talk about how anytime you're using a quote, you have to be very careful about what you're using in context, and how the specific context that, because I wasn't aware that the very next thing that Sidney Rigdon said was, and we will never be the aggressors. We're just, if you guys attack us, we'll attack you. And so when I saw that quote that Jacob read, I was like, well, that's kind of odd that they cut it off, like, just right there. And then they went on to talk about how, like, well, it's not that we were trying to cut him off. It's that, like, we had to decide what we were going to put in there. And, like, it's not really taking him out of context. And he could have lied, too. Like, he could have been totally lying when he said that we won't agree. Yeah, he could have. I'm not really defending Sidney Rigdon here. I don't really have a horse in this race. But you guys are... I'm defending what was said. That's a very reasonable thing to say. Like, if a guy tries to shoot my kid, I'm going to shoot him. That's what you're threatening violence. Well, yeah, in response to violence.
Yeah. Let me fast forward here. So the first note that I have written down.
Not only talk about what they are, but more importantly, and hopefully to make it really fun, to give examples of that logical fallacy in Mormonism. And that's why this show is titled Mormon Thinking Errors. And amazingly enough, for all 12 of these, it's like there's a lot of examples that I could find, at least for my 4. I can't speak for the other 2 gentlemen on the screen, but at least for me, I could find a lot of examples for each one, and I had to stop at some point. The church is rife with thinking errors. In fact, it could almost be said after today's show that to be a Mormon is to engage in thinking errors and logical fallacies, because they're used all the time. And hopefully by the time we're done in a couple hours.
It's actually the poisoning the whale fallacy.
That is that is the poisoning the whale fallacy. But this, you want it, just like all the single fallacies and the things that drives me so crazy with this stuff is that could be true. You know what I mean? It's because there's a fallacy in it. But I don't think it's true to say it just exactly like that. But I think to be human is to engage in thinking errors. But yes, that is poisoning the well for what we are about to go learn and see about Mormonism right from the start. And I have on good authority from Randy Bell all through this that as soon as a logical fallacy is committed, the argument's over. So we could just turn this off here, right? There's a poisoning the well right there. Also earlier, when we were talking about that Supreme Court ruling about what happened with those trans books and the things that the kids weren't able to opt out of, that was a legalistic fallacy. That's a pretty good one for the lawyers as well there. The legalistic fallacy, the assumption that because something is law, that it indicates any sort of truth. So we committed the legalistic fallacy there. Everybody gets the legalistic fallacy when they disagree with the law, and nobody gets it when they agree with law. Everybody goes both ways with it. But everything's a fallacy and everything's not a fallacy. Like I just said, the no true Scotsman is also somebody who's incapable of understanding averages. It's this stuff you could just be wrapped up in it for forever. And that's why it's such Reddit, midwit thinking, to sit there to think you have have a list of all the stuff to catch people in logical fallacies. Anyway, so then they get into the argument from consequences, which I already brought up. I mean, I busted out the last thing, but we can pull up when Risto asks him, how do you know what is true or what's not truth? But at the same time, it's going to come up all the time that because I've been in debates with Colby about this and other things, that pragmatism, the philosophy of pragmatism, new pragmatism, makes the argument that argument from consequences is not a fallacy. It goes into high detail, using even just different types of syllogisms to try to make the case. William James and C.S. Pierce make the case that it is not a logical fallacy when it is talking about evolution. We all ultimately point at evolution. Surviving and thriving might be the only thing that you can point to say what is good, because we're getting to moral discussions here and moral arguments. Stuff isn't factual of a factual nature. Was this translation real or something like that?
Well, so the thing with the argument from consequences is that let's just say it's it is mostly true. I'd say that if Mormonism had just the perfect outcomes and consequences all the time, that still wouldn't mean that Joseph Smith spoke to an angel, right? But does that mean if you're trying to sell an ideology, you just can never talk about the consequences of it? You can never, because I know Jacob relies on the good fruits stuff a lot, but he does, in his defense, say very frequently, I'm not saying that just because good things happen mean this is true. And so you're well, okay, that's fair. Then you can talk about why the good things happen, and you can talk about why you think it's true. That those feel like two separate things. So I don't know. Maybe there have been times when he makes the argument from consequences. I've not watched as much as you guys.
Oh, who makes it? When Jacob makes it?
Yeah, no, I'm sure he's made it before. I'm sure
there's almost nobody who doesn't make it at some point or another when you're trying to answer the question of what is good, and that's why William James and C.S. Pierce ultimately land on it. Perhaps you can get to something that's what is good that has less non sequiturs along the way, or less of Brett Weinstein's pragmatic truth about the quills, that something that's wrong but it's pragmatically true or something like that. But there's plenty of things where there's a hazy step in a syllogism, you don't know why something's good, or you're not able to explain why it's good. So you jump to the conclusion that's because it lends itself to survival and thrival, or it lends itself to better financial outcome, or it lends itself to more offspring or something like that. Those are all their evolutionary arguments. And it's one of the reasons that William James and C.S. Pierce landed on that, because they said if evolution is true, it also points towards certain religions having superior abilities in those levels, because they're the ones who are able to, I mean, obviously, as we've always said on here, religion was likely adaptive, not parasite. Adaptive, not parasite. It was one of the reasons certain groups were able to grow and survive and not kill themselves, and keep a cohesive group continuing on into the future until there no longer are. Religions are great at that.
I guess I just keep coming back to, I mean, anytime we talk about the whole thing, I think of the first Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris discussion where they're talking about truth, and it was just kind of a mess. And I remember thinking, like, look, I like you, Jordan Peterson, but you seem weird to me. Brett Weinstein explained it the best to me when he's talking about their whole disagreement on the nature of truth, where he said, he used the example of porcupines that, like, can porcupines throw their quills? No, but like a lot of us were taught that growing up. And so the argument from consequences would be, yes, porcupines can throw their quills because this society over here that believes they can throw their quills has less porcupine-related injuries than this society that doesn't believe it. And like, well, no, that doesn't mean it's true. And then Jordan Peterson will get a little bit weird and is like, that makes it more than true, or something like that. It's all, yeah, false but useful is what Forrest said. And it's almost like I wish we just had different fucking words for this. Like, I don't know, something.
But that brings up the equivocation stuff and why this all gets difficult in philosophy. And we're jumping all over the place. But I mean, maybe we'll pull up the point, because we got to jump all over. But Colby goes in on Peterson again, and we get back to that sorts of stuff. But pragmatically true, false but useful. Yeah, you're saying the same thing. Well, let's get Wittgenstein in here, because Wittgenstein and what's his name, Ted Danson from season 2 of Fargo, because they're the one guys who say let's make one single word for every possible concept, not all these different words that can be equivocated against. But too bad we're in this world of philosophy and all that sorts of stuff. But I guess we can jump all the way to it. But Colby brings up later that Peterson is like the ultimate equivocator, and it comes back to that whole concept of him saying, like, doing and being. We'll just pull up the moment. I think I have the time of that one. Oh, there's Risto's question at 3 o'clock. Let me jump to the 3 hours, and we'll jump back and forth, since I know we're on
4 hours.
Yeah, it's too hard to pull it. It's too hard for me to sit there and watch it in time to get through all the different stuff, because I have a busy week anyway. Somewhere around here, there's Risto.
Stood what the Egyptian language was on a very basic level. Egyptian does not translate this way, where 3 characters will generate a paragraph of text. It's that simple. My point is that this statement by the church is an absolute lie, and it's an example of this selective skepticism, where they apply a standard in a way of special pleading that they would apply to no other thing. If we were dealing with a competing faith system and they were trying to disprove that faith system, you and I both know that Mormons would not make the same claim that, well, we just don't know the relationship between these doctrines, because the relationship is so obvious unless you're determined. When we were talking about critical thinking and logical fallacies, and I just thought this comment from one of the listeners, someone named Risto, commented, why does it matter if what you believe is true? And to me, that is one of the most absurd questions you can ask. The reason it matters, let me start over. The reason,
you gotta get. I mean, I guess you never know what's coming at you. But
how does he do that?
Yeah, because you make these guys assume that you're apologizing for Mormonism.
No, I get it, but I'm just like, it's he gets more comments through than any of us do. I don't know how he does it.
Why it matters if what you believe is true is because
we're not immune from the Risto question. Risto drops those questions on us all the time too.
Oh yeah.
We have a limited amount of time and a limited amount of things we can prioritize, and there's this concept known as opportunity costs. Every minute you spend researching or believing something that isn't true is a minute you can't spend furthering something that actually is true. The only reason people ask questions like this and pivot to this,
and why do you need to further things that are true versus things that aren't true?
Who's to say?
Good consequences. argument.
weird selective skepticism is because they don't want to admit the obvious. Just like we did with the Book of Abraham, where the church has to say, we don't know the relationship between these two things. The only reason you would ask, why do I care if what I believe is true, is because you know deep down that what you believe isn't true, and you're desperate not to admit that fact.
He just assumes that Risto's a Mormon.
He assumes Risto's a Mormon, and that he's only asking that question for mind reading, like some reason, like he's trying to apologize for something else. But that's
it's a pretty safe assumption, I guess. If you're running an ex-Mormon podcast and somebody pushes back, it's a decent enough assumption that the person pushing back is Mormon.
Totally. But what's not there, except for a little bit of something that you could deduce, means you're talking about the argument from consequence, like the consequences of it are important.
Yeah,
there's
the consequences of truth are important.
Yeah, the why isn't there. You didn't give an answer to why.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Flip.
Well, I don't even remember.
Oh, sorry to cut you off. But this is one of the deals. This is one of the points of like all of this moral philosophy stuff, is that it's hard. It's difficult.
Yeah.
I think William James and C.S. Pierce have done one of the better jobs of making an argument for that helps, that goes in line with something that both. It's the reason Peterson was bringing it up to Sam Harris so much, because he was trying to point to him to somebody who does do a little bit of ability of like jumping the gap of getting an ought from an is. And you can get an ought from an is if you're saying survival is good or thriving is good. But if you get to Foucault, if you go back to the who's to say, what's to say, who's to say, what's to say that child rape is bad? Who's to say, what's to say that humans should exist? You get to the anti-natalists. Who's to say what's to say that it's like you guys don't realize like how far, and Foucault is the most cited person in all of academia. You guys don't know what time it is for how crazy the academic world has gotten about this stuff. And Peterson's one of the ones trying to combat it and fight it, and did a pretty good job at it for a few years, but they're still as nuts as ever. And would you go and bark at critical race theorists of why empiricism or why epistemology? Because how do they call the epistemology? They had their own term for white epistemology that was using the white man's tools that were, or as the feminists would say, it was a rape manual for nature and all that sorts of stuff. All of our epistemology gets just as shit on by the humanities at the universities, if not more shit on than it ever was by any sort of Austin Fife. And it's shit on more by queer theorists than it is by Austin Fife.
Yeah, well, we all go to the grave anyway, regardless of what we believe, whether what we believe is true, right? Maybe that's what Risto's getting at. But you're right. I mean, how much time have I spent in Mormonism studying things that I could have been studying other things? I'm just so grateful that God has blessed me with this opportunity of podcasting now in the latter portion of my life, that I can use all this crazy.
So it was pragmatically useful.
It's untrue stuff that I studied for decades.
Yeah. I wrote a book, Post-Traumatic Thriving, and part of me wants to be upset over the 50 plus years that I gave discretionary time and money to the church, sent 3 of my 4 kids on missions, and on, what we all go through as members, and realizing that was a waste. But the final chapter is gratitude. I guess the most productive, positive way you can look at it is being, like you just said, RFM, being grateful for the lessons and doing something about it now. And I think that's why, we spend our time, looking at this in efforts to both process what we've been through and maybe help a few folks out that are dealing with the same stuff.
Yeah.
I mostly do it to dunk on Jacob Hansen, but yes.
Well, that's good too. That's honorable.
Is Jacob Hansen ever going to honor the debate that he proposed with you about the Book of Mormon?
I think you and I both know the answer to that question, RFM.
Okay, so he's not going to. He's just a liar from the beginning.
Would you take on the queer theory side of it? I've never said anything. Why don't you guys say anything about it? Why do you not dare to go? Well, you guys said that Austin Fife gets out of stuff and saying, I'm just a guy. That's not my area of expertise. That's not my stuff.
Yeah.
You were commenting on the one with John Streeter where Maven went and posted something by a Foucauldian biological researcher who was talking about queer theory. I did later point out how that guy's entire argument comes from the universe of Foucault. He did a Foucault. I've talked about it on here forever on like how they do that. They talk about historical contingencies of truth. Look up Foucault's Episteme. There's historical contingencies of when something is a certain type of truth versus another type of truth. Like you guys are barking up the wrong tree with the people who get wonky on epistemology.
Well, and Okay, this is a little bit. Sorry, were you done?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Okay.
No.
A little bit unrelated, but I always admit to doing this fallacy because it's almost like at some point the ad hom becomes almost valid. You know, like I don't know, like with Foucault. I feel like if you're following a shit ton of things that he does, and like you see that it all just kind of leads back to pedophilia, you can kind of do an ad hom and be like, hey, that guy was into pedophilia.
Yeah.
And that is an ad hom. I'm attacking the arguer, not the argument. And I do that when I think I got kicked out of an Exmormon group because somebody posted something by Alok Vadmenon. Do you know who that is?
No.
It's an Indian dude who is like a queer theorist, dresses up, puts all that makeup and shit, very hairy, like trying to look very queer, basically. And it was something about queer stuff. And I there's also a quote by him talking about how your daughters are not as innocent as you think. Children can be sexy too, or something like that. Children can be sexual, all this shit. And anytime he's mentioned, I just post that with the caption, "Here I go doing an ad hom."
But I think that does kind of go back to like a lot of logical fallacies stuff. Is sure, it's not perfect reasoning, but at tons of times it's totally true. Like these guys justify why they're able to call Jacob Hansen names, but Jacob Hansen can't call them names. But that's because they make the argument later. But Jacob makes the argument later. You guys overlook that he doesn't just rely on ad hominem. He does just as much of that. But in both of your cases, you're all internety shits, and I think it's fine you do ad hominem. You know, it's well, Jacob Hansen said this. Fine. You know what I mean? Like I have no problem with it, really. Like, and it actually communicates meaning to people that's useful sometimes.
And not every insult is an ad hom.
Yeah.
That guy's a fucking retard. That's not an ad hom.
But
it's just
all
mean.
the time people say stuff like, oh, Jacob Hansen said that. And yes, it is too, like, meaningful enough to communicate something that's probably, you know, directionally true every single time when you say it, you know, or just, you know, like the opposite. Like, it's sure, it's a logical fallacy, but the logical fallacies are very often heuristics that are most times true.
Kobe is in the chat again. He said, did you guys just argue against attempting to believe true things? There's a world of difference between arguing Mormonism is true because it leads to good consequences and pointing out, I'm assuming the rest of that's coming, but no, we didn't argue against attempting to believe things are true. Chris is trying to point out how fallacies can be seen everywhere and how if you continue...
We are ex-Mormons.
Yeah, it's
we do not believe in the propositional truth claims of Mormonism.
Well, no. So he says if you and pointing out the pragmatic reasoning for wanting to believe true things, so weird it's like parody. No, he's asking you why believing true things is good, and he's
you didn't answer it. You didn't answer it. You except you gave an argument from consequences.
Yeah, that's the point.
And we're saying that that's fine, but like you could say it's a fallacy, you know. It's no, Forrest. He's not right. Like we're just pointing out that basically all sorts of moral truths aren't so easy. They're not simple things. Like was this a true translation or something like that? And it's not just us. We pointed at you, and I pointed at you many times before, that people like William James and C.S. Pierce and John Dewey get into that sort of stuff. Because wanting to believe things because they are pragmatic is not an argument from consequences fallacy. It is like if you're saying things because something is you're saying something, you're arguing something to a consequence. Look, we'll get to it later. Okay. The issue isn't that the logical fallacies don't exist or don't matter. It is what they are used sloppily. Yeah, if it's jumping to conclusions, if you're skipping steps, it is getting to a fallacious level. Let's see here.
You can also just tell people when they're lying. The lying fallacy is my favorite. Are you playing something?
No, I'm trying to get back to it. Hold on.
Oh, I gotcha.
I've lost it. Hold on.
Abraham at all. And so you can see that here, the example. Joseph Smith translated the Book of Abraham when pressed. Well, not a literal translation. It was more of a revelatory process, or this expanded translation. And so this is equivocation because it's taking this term translating and quietly redefining it depending upon the audience and upon the need for the argument. So my hallmarks of someone engaging in equivocation are the use of vague terms, debate bro tactics, and we'll give an example of that in just a second. Conspiratorial thinkers often do this, and people who are attempting to manipulate often do this by using equivocation almost as a form of Mott and Bailey. The frequent use of slogans and deepities, again, that term from Dan Dennett, is also a hallmark of someone engaging in equivocation.
Okay.
And they're also moving the goalposts.
Absolutely. So here I've got who I have now dubbed the Earl of Equivocation, Jordan B. Peterson, and I've got an adorable claymation version of him saying, well, what do you mean by, just imagine Kermit the Frog's voice coming out of that claymation character. And I've got a great clip of Jordan Peterson doing some of his most egregious equivocations in this this clip here. It's just 30 seconds.
You know, so people say to me, what do you believe in God? And I think, okay, there's a couple of mysteries in that question. What do you mean do? What do you mean you? What do you mean believe? And what do you mean God? And you say as the questioner, well, we already know what all those things mean except belief in God. And I think, no, if we're going to get down to the fundamental brass tacks, we don't really know what any of those things.
I'm stuck on the term in. What does that mean?
Yeah, that was the one he didn't ask. I think to steelman his position, I think the fair thing to ask for follow-up on the definition is God. What do you mean by believe in God? That is a term that can be subject to multiple different definitions depending on what people mean. But to ask, what do you believe? What do you mean by believe? What do you mean by do? What do you mean believe by you? No one is that confused on what language means. And
no one is that confused on what language they use. Like Kobe, like how much have you been exposed to actual like postmodernists like Derrida, or other philosophers like Heidegger? And I agree that in that situation, Peterson is playing a different game than what's going on in those little debate me bro worlds. He's trying to get into things that are it's not something for like a little 3-minute debate or something like that. And it's not the right time to bring up that sort of deal. But have you read Heidegger's 7 books on what being means? Have you read John Dewey's like multiple books on what doing means? And he's playing a philosophical game there, and we're critics ourselves of what philosophy does, and that we were talking about earlier, like everything's an equivocation on like what meanings and words and all those sorts of things mean. That's why we keep bringing back up Wittgenstein, because Wittgenstein felt that we just need to come up with words that all only have one meaning. There's no way to equivocate. But that equivocation is the game of all philosophers, especially the postmodernist one. And no word mean anything, or they're contingent upon a time frame. That is the game of the Humanities Academy, 100%. That's Peterson hardly does it like anywhere near as much, and you're calling him the Earl of Equivocation. He's just the popularized version of the Earl of Equivocation. As the Dragon Desert, would love to see Kobe read grammatology and Tractatus. Yeah. But it's true that he's entering into a world where people kind of aren't ready for that. They're not meaning to do that. But to actually steelman Peterson, he does go into that realm all the time when he's talking about people and their Neoplatonic aiming being what their religion is. As Rizzo says, yes, Peterson is pushing to ask a deeper question, and it's a bad forum to do it. Like, I agree, it was like a bad forum in a place.
No, so what I always say, my criticism of Peterson is that, like, maybe you should, I don't know, it's almost like code switch or something. They speak a little bit differently in different forums, right? If you're in a forum where you're talking to a bunch of theists who are trying to come closer to God, or people who want to become a theist, or whatever it is, then that kind of speech makes sense. Like, what does it really mean to believe something? You would have to want it so hard that you die for it, or whatever you want to say, like the big explanation that he goes into. But I think it would make a lot more sense if, when he's talking to people like Dawkins, if he just used their language, because like, I call it the, you know what the fuck I mean principle. It's my fallacy that I coined. And so anytime like an atheist is like, well, do you believe in God? What does that even mean? Well, okay, what I mean by it, like I'm an atheist, so what I mean by it is, do you think that there's a guy or an entity that made us, and do you think that after I die, my eyes will open again and I will see and experience things again, or something along those lines? So I understand the frustration.
Yeah, I get the frustration, and Forrest says that he hides the ball on purpose. I don't necessarily agree with that, Peterson, and he doesn't do it anywhere near as hard as postmodernists do it, or somebody like Zizek does it. Like, get into Zizek at all, like, tell me Zizek's not the Earl of Equivocation. But Peterson, I think he's generally always kind of arguing for that Platonic, like, highest value is what you actually believe type stuff, and I think he's been pretty consistent with that over time.
It's consistent. It's highest value is what you believe, and what you believe is what you act out. If you don't act it out, then you don't actually believe it.
And beyond that, being a psychologist and a professor of psychology and getting into Freudian stuff and all that stuff, he's very actively always saying, like, do you actually act out? Do you believe what you announce you will believe, or do you believe what you act out? And getting people to stop and think about that is a question. And I know people don't do that in their actual lives. People don't actually act out exactly what they claim they believe. You know?
Well, it's like I know cheating on my wife would be bad, and if I actually cheated on my wife, I would still know in my mind that I did a bad thing. I might even try to justify it though, or something like that. But I do like the idea of a real belief, like a true, deeply held belief. As if you really believed that cheating on your wife was bad, you would stop cheating on your wife.
I would agree with Forrest and with Troy that he equivocates on just being honest that he's probably talking about a different thing than evangelical Christians are talking about when he's talking about religious things. But he is 100, and we were talking earlier, like Vanderklay kind of pushes the same sort of thing, and there are certain different religions that kind of lean more towards that Neoplatonic esoteric side of stuff. But Peterson's always been pretty consistent that he's just talking about, like, what you're aiming at is your highest thing, and how you act isn't necessarily what you propositionally declare and claim, and how you're being in the world maybe not be exactly what you think you're being or acting like. Are you? And Risa's right that he's trying to get people to stop and think about that stuff, and he's usually trying to jar them with that. And it fell flat in that. Like, I agree that it fell flat in that forum, but it also, I mean, we'll watch here as they continue to talk about it.
Unless they have to be, and they're trying not to commit to a point. And I think Jordan Peterson is the king of that.
What do you think, Randy? You like Jordan Peterson?
You think he's the king of that because you apparently, to me, are highly uninformed of queer theorists, of postmodernists, of Foucault, of Derrida, of these different people that I know you've heard the names float around, and everybody who's followed from them for 40 years and taking over the Humanities Academy. Like Peterson, I frequently say Peterson can't be as bad as the postmodernists because he ranks things and lands on possible descriptions of stuff. Like, you have not looked into what actual deconstruction is. The words that ex-Mormons throw around and co-opted from Derrida. Actual deconstruction is the concept that no word means anything. Go try to read anything, as Christopher was saying in the chat. Go read anything by Derrida and realize that guy became the most popular person, one of the most popular persons next to Foucault. Read Lacan. Like, and these guys dominate the academy. They dominate the academy, and that's one of the things Peterson came in to point out. And you're calling him the king of it.
In fairness, the postmodernists are lying when they say they don't have hierarchies of which one of these things are more true. Their hierarchy is just 2 levels tall. It's the norm at the bottom, and it's literally everything else at the top.
Yeah. But I mean, that's ultimately what we've been trying to say, because as we talked about at the beginning, is we try to bring up these different types of things or concepts or ideas, and we can't even go into full detail about some of the stuff we were talking about at the beginning. But it's like in the ex-Mormon world, it's like lobbing bombs into the Iron Dome of Israel or something like that. You can't even like penetrate it and talk to people about the people who really do equivocate about what's to say about the age a sexual partner or something like that? What's your argument? Why? Like Forrest is saying it's not a logical fallacy to get to these answers of why. Like if you're arguing from consequences, that's not a logical fallacy. You're making a jump there. Like it's a non sequitur. You're jumping in is-ought gap, and I think it still jumps in is-ought gap. But I think it's a good argument. I think the argument from consequences is a good argument, but it's ultimately a jump.
Would you respond the same way if he said something like, "What do you mean by what? What do you mean by is? What do you mean by
that's Bill
a
Clinton,
woman?
Right? That's Bill
woman.
Clinton who says is. Yeah. Oh, there you go. You're doing Bill Clinton. Oh, what do you mean by a woman? No, you're doing Judith Butler.
Yeah.
And it could be all the guys in Thoughtful Saints.
Oh yeah, totally.
What does okay mean? What do you mean by okay?
So Forrest had mentioned up there earlier. He said that there's a difference between appeal to a argument from consequences and arguments based on consequences.
Like the consequences makes the thing true.
I guess I don't know, because like if I tell you pedophilia is bad and you go full Foucault and ask me why is pedophilia bad, it's like because it's really, really bad for kids. Like, why is it bad for kids? Well, they have terrible outcomes. They a high percentage of them go on to molest other kids, and then a lot of them go on to have worse outcomes in life. Is that an argument about consequences, or it is an argument from consequences? Because I'm trying to sort of feel out what Forrest
Colby,
is
your
talking
point
about.
was he's the king of doing it, but no, I also don't acknowledge your point. I think Peterson actually lands on a far more solid ground than people are giving him credit for. What do you mean by you? They're just equivocating.
No, that was I don't know. I think he was dumb to ask all that. I think what he really wants to ask is, what do you mean by belief? Because that's usually the specific word.
He's probably talking extemporaneously in the moment, because he usually just lands on the things like, what do you mean by true, or what do you mean by believe, or what do you mean by do? And those are all things that is equivocating or not. But when you get into the philosophical arguments, when you get into Heidegger, he brings up actual problem points. And yeah, philosophy is all bullshit, but it actually is what is being, what is becoming, what is doing, what is being acted upon, what is acting, like what are speech acts, if we're getting to Searle and all that sorts of stuff. It's not easy if you get into people who are talking about it like that guy's talking about it, and it's the wrong forum to do it if you're just doing this basic little debate and you want some people to just kind of agree with you that, hey, your posited Reddit atheist God doesn't exist. And that's something that I will do more than Peterson. I don't believe in that God, no, but he usually doesn't, probably because he's not trying to. And that's maybe where Forrest is right, is he could be hiding the ball with that because he doesn't want to be on record or just say, no, I don't believe in that simple thing, but I don't know. But is a logical no for us. I think that is an appeal to consequences for the Mormonism to be true, but it is also a jump back in other areas. Any sort of time you are jumping a gap to say this thing's good to do because it becomes its consequences, has the other thing going back towards it the other direction. And the point of it is that you're not jumping Hume's is-ought gap. Nobody's jumping it. The is and the ought are on the other side of something, and you're doing a non sequitur if you're going one way or the other on the direction. But I'm not against arguments from consequences being, because I 100% believe it doesn't mean Mormonism's true.
Well, it's the difference between true and good.
Is it true? Is the true arrow flies or something like that? Is it a true thing that will truly help a population grow and thrive into the future? And that is one of the equivocations. But in Peterson's world, he's actually making a point there. He's making a point of what societies survive and thrive.
Did you guys ever see the Cloud Atlas? You speak the true. That's an actual line from that show.
I actually only saw that on Rick and Morty when they were looking at an alternate dimension where Jerry was in
Yeah,
Cloud
no,
Atlas.
I actually saw Cloud Atlas in the theater.
How about this? I want to go to a religion that produces truth. Therefore, I should be a Mormon. So fallacy time.
Good results.
But therefore, I should be a Mormon or a could be a Mormon because you're producing a false dichotomy there, which is a whole different fallacy. If you actually listen to what I said actual Mormonism produces many good effects for some. I wasn't saying that you didn't say that. What I was saying is that anytime people get into the world of, we're going back to Foucault here of like what is good? What do you mean by good? Like what do you mean by better? Like that's the thing that you didn't answer in Ristol's question of why. And when you go to answer those questions, you're going to be making a jump. And one of the things that we've been getting back to the original part of all of this is that there's going to be some fallacies in all things, like a little bit. Like we're not going to avoid fallacies. We're not going to not be circular. Like I saw about Quine's dogmas of empiricism is that empiricism is necessarily circular, or even like the statement of the only way you can find truth is through the scientific process is itself a statement that cannot survive that claim. That's Quine's dogmas of empiricism. It's just, but the problem with all the overthinking about logical fallacies to dunk on your opponent or something like that, that's just the point that I'm making with all this. Why does that matter? Says Risto. Well, at least we all agree that even Maven thinks that what is good and true, she figured it all out. That's true. You can use Maven epistemology, or you can use Michelle Stone tier epistemology. If Michelle Stone cries about it, it is true.
And if Maven thinks it is true. And if you think even a half a degree to the left of that, you are terrible.
Forrest, to put it simply, I think that whenever I'm arguing for consequences of something, I'm committing a little bit of a fallacy. Like when I say Mormonism is pretty good for people and all that sorts of stuff, and yeah, just like we were talking about the porcupines and stuff like that. Like I am not Mormon because I do not think it is true, and I value things a little bit differently. But if somebody else does think it's true and it's helpful and useful for them, but I can stop and say I think that it is good for some people and that sort of deal. It's Is
it a difference in like the verbiage used? Is it good versus true? Because like if I were to say A produces good results, therefore A is good, then that's fine. Like most people would probably agree with that. But if I said A produces good results, therefore A is true, then that would be a fallacy. And Peterson kind of is trying to do that Platonic thing where he argues that the good is the truth.
Forrest, what spell out what you think an argument from consequence is. But I think it's any time that you are trying. I mean, it's basically trying to jump the Isaac gap like a little bit, and like Sam Harris does, like anybody does. If you're trying to get in like an area of the weird brand of selective skepticism is so weird to me. It just ends at the problem of hard solipsism. I don't know. He might be talking to somebody else. It was, I don't remember your first example, but the Mormonism, and then the Mormon looks back at makes the Mormonism true. The consequences makes the Mormonism true.
Yeah, it makes it true.
That's there with any consequence, though.
It might make it good, but it doesn't make it literally.
The other
true.
thing could be like not literally a propositionally true or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Anyways. But still, like most of the rest of all the philosophy is begging the question anyway. It's true because it's true, like the dogmas of Peterson, which is fine. What I'm just ultimately saying is that in the world of morality, this stuff isn't hard science. It's not math. It's not there yet, and beyond all that, some of the places where it gets worse in the world is right square in the academic issues, and it's one of the things we've been poking at and looking at forever. Kobe, would you like to come on and this is all the way back to the Jacob debate. You can ask us questions about what we think about these different types of things, on what's good or what's bad, or why you should or should not do something. Yet we can ask those same questions on why you should do that for, say, some underage kid who declares they're trans or they'll kill themselves or something like that. What is true and what is not true in that world. Like we talk about like how willing we are to be autistically true about something and say something no matter the consequences and no matter what somebody might hear about some sort of side or issue of it. Are you actually willing to go on record and talk about that sort of stuff? Or is it something that you just avoid entirely because you know there's an ideological bubble that won't accept it and will boot you out of it? Just like we get booted out of the ex-Mormon side and the Mormon side because we say, I don't believe this thing and I don't believe that thing.
Yeah.
What is a woman?
I think, like, because, you know, like, I mean, I've said it a million times, but like, for the exact same reason that we're not children of our Heavenly Father, you can't be born in the wrong body.
Colby, I don't assume you're sorry, Flip. I don't assume I know your position. I assume I know what you won't be a hardcore logical fallacy guy about. I know you won't.
Unless you want to come talk about the logical fallacies of the trans issue that Jacob wanted to talk about.
Although we are getting to a world where it's getting a little bit more acceptable to be honest about that stuff, even if you aren't a bigot.
Just a little bit.
What were you saying, Flip? Sorry.
No, just that, like, because I mean, when somebody says, "Oh, I'm a spirit child of my Heavenly Father," I say, well, no, there's no such thing as souls. You are your body. And when somebody says, "I was born in the wrong body," I say, no, there's no such thing as souls. You are your body. You know, but that thing is like in the ex-Mormon world, I can say all day, like, well, of course you can't be a spirit child of your Heavenly Father because you are your body. But if I come out and say, well, you can't be born in the wrong body because you are your body, I'll be thrown out of the room.
That's also known as the fallacy of special pleading.
Yeah.
Forrest, if you're still out there, part of the problem with like the fallacy thing is, I think the example that you're making, the assumption of the past thing is not true. Like if it's talking back and it makes this thing not true, but it is, like the porcupine. But it is also still a logical fallacy if you assume, like if you assume that the good thing or the thing that is true or not true was the reason for the outcome, even if you don't know what it is yet. Like if you don't have that answer yet, but you're assuming that it must be the good outcome, it was because of this other thing that seems true. If you don't know yet, it's still you haven't, like, you're operating on a jump. Literally can't even follow what you're saying. I think Forrest what I'm talking about right there. But what are you talking about? What I'm trying to talk about on the argument of consequence, if there is a statement of something like a porcupine, people who stay away from porcupine. Well, how's the porcupine thing go, Jared?
It's just the people who say that porcupines can throw their quills. It's good but not true, and Peterson will try to argue that makes it true. Basically,
if it is not yet proven that porcupines don't throw their quills, and you're making that assumption and say that they do throw their quills, it's still a logical fallacy. You don't know it. You don't have the proof yet, is what I'm saying.
Anyway, I don't know how effective it's going to be to have somebody arguing on screen and somebody arguing in chat.
Yeah.
Because it's very difficult to understand the chat people entirely.
Yeah. Well, you're saying exactly what I'm saying, Kobe. They're precisely because they sound true, but they aren't. No, the fallacy doesn't have to not be true to not be a fallacy. If it's supposedly just in the reasoning of like why it's true. You're saying from the consequence isn't the answer to the original thing.
Well, I went to Long Beach once and heard him speak with my sons. Jordan Peterson is like anybody, really. There's things that he says that I think are right on the money and very profound, and other things, I'm left scratching my head, and other things I just don't agree with. So it's a mixed bag.
What do you mean by bag? No, I'm just kidding.
What do you mean by did?
They're more fair on Peterson.
I mean Jacob Hansen.
What's that?
I said there's more fair on Peterson than most ex-Mormons you'll see.
Yeah.
Oh, Randy?
Yeah, I mean, he was like,
Yeah.
hey, he says some good things, he says some bad. That should be pretty much everybody's stance. That's my stance on Destiny.
Yeah, well, this one is even a logical
Bad stuff he
fallacy.
says is
But,
insane.
he claims that John DeLynn wants to have every possible person come to the table to talk about stuff, and that's just not true. Not a fallacy, and we have examples that aren't us of that, but we can't really talk about them. Oh, it's not there in the thing. We can go back to like another issue in there.
Oh, sweet. We got non-devays in
One of the things like you argue about there is that you say that Jacob Hansen, who loves him, claims he's past his prime, and that's it's nitpicky, but you're being a fallacious argument about why Peterson's wrong about stuff because Jacob Hansen doesn't like him anymore, which Jacob does, but but that's just what we're saying. Nitpicking the fallacy, like that fallacy doesn't matter. If you guys use ad hominem against Jacob, it doesn't matter. Like that's just the point of it. Is like the ad hominem stuff or the logical fallacy stuff is just all swampy quagmire and the stuff. I mean, I think it's useful and all that sorts of deal, but to think like it's any sort of slam dunk in any sort of argument one way or the other, I think is not helpful.
Forrest says go hang out with his wife. Gay.
Go hang out with his wife. Oh, he's leaving to go hang out with his wife.
How gay.
Burden of proof.
What are you looking for?
Oh, I was just looking at some of the other arguments. You brought up that Carl Sagan, because they mentioned Carl Sagan at the end, and Carl Sagan warns of the fallacy, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was the skeptics. I can't remember the guy that wrote that. I can't remember his name, but yeah, I think it's originally. Isn't that a Carl Sagan argument originally? The fallacy? Because he brings up a good point in the Skeptics Guide. He talks about getting too wound up in fallacies. You just end up losing track of the argument entirely because you could just find fallacious reasoning everywhere. And I think that's mostly the point you're trying to make right now.
Yeah. People overplay their hand.
Well, I mean, not only that, I mean, there's just the whole level of it. It's just not that useful. You walk around with like all the things stacked in your head and then say, because somebody did one fallacy, I'm done listening to them or something like that. I think that's ultimately the argument. Like if I hear somebody like using ad hominem, I'm not done with them.
I have to stop listening now.
Yeah, exactly. Or, if somebody makes an argument that's like a little bit fallacious or something, it's all obviously not always purposely deceptive. I think sometimes it's deceptive. And as we talked about, the Mott and Bailey, nobody uses that more purposefully than queer theorists, Colby. Like queer theory purposely uses Mott and Bailey constantly.
Feminism is a bunch of Mott and Bailey.
Yeah, no, Flip. Feminism is just the belief that women have the same rights as men.
Radical.
It's the radical belief that women are human, but it's not a Mott and Bailey. No.
Yeah. But the fallacies also point at the thing that I'm saying earlier is that, just because something is a fallacy doesn't mean like the final thing of it's not true either,
He called you not divas, Sean. He said the not divas. He acknowledged that you're not divas.
Yeah. Come on, buddy.
Yeah. The takeaway on ChatGPT, spotting a fallacy only discredits the argument in the moment. It does not discredit conclusions.
Yeah.
You need independent support to reject or accept any conclusions. But yeah, all sorts of like fallacious arguments are used. I mean, in the Mormon world, and he brought up some good points and some certain ones that definitely drive me nuts from the Mormon world as well, and that whole thing. And for sure, you guys have labeled out some of the stuff that Austin Fife has pointed at that are not good arguments. They're not helpful or useful to me in any way, shape, or form. The only deal is, I'm going to say what it is, Gobi. I'll say what it is. The world could use that outside of just taking down Mormonism. Help us out. You know what I mean? Because everything is supposedly that we have these guys who are going to go hardcore, speak the truth in the face of everything that's difficult to say like out in the world.
I'm talking with Sean Burke over whether he's DVAs or not. And I told him, but I know it's really you. And then Starbase Golem said, it's because we can hear your fake laugh in between the sentences you write.
Kobe, this is so silly. I don't defend queer theorists. Yeah, but John Lynn does constantly on the show, and it comes up all over on these different places, and we mention and talk about it. And there's a whole different issue where Jonathan Streeter's gotten into it, and I saw you argue with Jonathan Streeter on that thing where we were talking about it, where Maiden Witten posted that guy. What was that guy's name who posted the thing?
Posted what?
Maven posted the queer theorist, the biological queer theorist. What's that guy's name? Forrest. That guy's a Forrest too. And she posted it on John DeLynne's website. And there's been a lot of different times. I'll give you a backstory if you don't know that Jonathan Streeter has gone in there and posted and talked about those different issues being very, very similar to other cult tactic issues and being very, very similar to other types of fallacious religious arguments. And we've talked about it a million times on here as well.
Well, you can draw you can draw as many parallels as you want to the Mormon Church and Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientology, even like extreme Islam, and they won't kick you off. It's just, Jonathan will try to draw the parallels between Mormonism and queer theory, and they are many.
Colby, I am kicked off of John DeLynne's page, Mormon Stories, because of that post that Maven put. And all I said on that post is if I put any sort of scientist that argues the opposite of this up here, the post would be taken down. And now I'm not on Mormon Stories. And you were there arguing with Jonathan Streeter on that. You were doing a Mott and Bailey argument with him, trying to argue with him something that was far less than what the extremism of queer theory actually is, and what that guy was saying in that video, which that guy was doing was a Foucauldian genealogical argument, where what he does is he starts out talking about the historical contingent truths of how something's perceived over time, and who's to say what's to say, who's to say what's to say, what's to say. So it can all just be redefined from here now. Oh, but it was all also actually a conspiracy theory done by religion and science in the 1800s of why we think there's two sexes.
Yeah.
And I'm kicked off of Mormon Stories for saying if I posted something that said different.
Is there a logical fallacy about assuming that everything is a social construct and therefore invalid? Has that been coined yet?
It's the raping Tunisian boys fallacy.
The what?
It's the raping Tunisian boys fallacy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that's just like the ultimate point of that, and why we've been pissing on this and poking at it for forever is just that it's just the Jonathan Haidt thing. That's the whole point of the Jonathan Haidt thing, is that for whatever morality binds and blinds you, you'll start making logical fallacies for it. And that's even academic morality, or religion as we've called it many different times, the cathedral or something like that. And
New Church.
Yeah. And Jonathan Streeter's in there poking on Mormon Stories right now because he's got much more clout than us. The three of us are kicked off of Mormon Stories for doing, I think we did far less than Jonathan Streeter's done in there.
I got kicked out for saying we shouldn't be bigoted against Mormons.
But we were told in that episode by Randy Bell that all John Lynn is there doing is wanting to bring a place where all voices and ideas and things can come to the table to talk about truth. Because truth is super important, because it's good, because it's got good consequences. Yeah, it's such a lie and all that sorts of stuff. But even beyond all that sort of deal, I think RFM and Bill do better than Dylan does, and not 100% better, but a little bit better. But there was Bill Reel looking for any sort of taker to talk about who can justify Joseph Smith sleeping with kids or taking child brides or something like that. Had it on a Wednesday morning. I said I could come in and I can justify it through Foucault. And you guys frequently bring up that some of the authorities you appeal to are the academy and people that you can trust from the universities, all that sorts of stuff. Foucault is the most cited person in all of humanities. I could make an argument through Foucault on why Joseph Smith, who's to say what's to say, is why could you even consider it bad that he would be marrying those child brides? And yes, you could argue it through Foucauldian stuff. And Foucault, if you look him up, we pulled up like the queer theory Jeopardy here. Foucault is the grandfather of queer theory.
Indeed.
Because he taught them all how to do that historical contingency epistemology. Question what is true, and he even knows what's true. And are you just being forced of what's true from the episteme, from the current zeitgeist of biopower and all that sorts of stuff?
I have to. Sorry, go on. Mine's unrelated, so you finish.
No. Well, I was just gonna say. I mean, the whole ultimate point is when I was 20-something years old, I went on a multiple year cultish indoctrination, and I'm not talking about the mission that I serve. I'm talking about going to graduate school and all that stuff. I'm hearing a lot about what other people have said, Chris. I tend to only answer for what I have said myself. So beyond talking about what you have said yourself, some of that stuff, like we've pointed out, that obviously fallacies pop up as they pop up with everybody, or errors and that sort of stuff. But yeah, we know that you guys go full blast after the Mormons and all that sorts of stuff. But all we're saying is there's an emperor without clothes, like, right, dancing all around you, and that's we've been saying all around.
Colby the guy. So Jacob Hansen wanted to debate him about queer theory. Is that Colby?
Yeah,
transgender shit specifically.
Transgender shit.
Well, it was going to be Mormon stuff, and Jacob agreed to it, and then Jacob pulled out at the last moment. But also, would you debate queer theory with me? And I thought, good, do them both, and then it was run about it. It's just run about, like run away type stuff.
Why not do that?
It's a slam dunk.
What aboutism? That's not what aboutism.
If you do, Colby, I have advice. If you do the debate Jacob wanted to do, where he said,
"Wait, you said he
there
would
are
do
no."
It? Why don't they do it?
No, Jacob wanted to do so. He wanted to do a debate, I think, with Colby, with a few people on. There's no naturalistic explanation for the fallacy for the Book of Mormon. And so I've actually figured out a really good argument against that. Like when he says, what do you think the explanation is? The best debate tactic is to be like, Joseph Smith wrote it. That was it. That's it. That's the whole argument. He just fucking wrote it. Or, I mean, maybe he stole it from some shit, but yeah.
You've literally told me what, and I acknowledged it. What I have said from the start is there is no reason, if you're just going to be somebody who can just follow all hard truth like an autist, you're an autist that way. Why is it inappropriate and pearl clutchy to say, okay, we will also discuss the trans issue? Like, what are you afraid of? What? No, he backed out and said that the Book of Mormon cannot possibly be historical.
That's a layup.
Yeah.
I am neurodivergent. Yes. Welcome to the club.
Hey,
but we are. That's one of our things that we say is we joke here that we are saying you're just hard on like the autistic truth, and I actually do believe that is something that you generally try to sow if you commit any sort of errors. It's just maybe not being aware of what some other people do, but what it seems like to us is like there's a reason you said Jacob backed out, not me. I was talking to Jacob behind it, and he said that he would do it if you did both of them.
Yeah, no, it sounds like
you said that you guys said that we won't do it if we have to do it because that's inappropriate to switch over to also doing the queer theories.
Yeah, I swear I saw the Twitter saying just that. I don't know. Maybe we missed part of it. No, but it sounds like it sounds like we have two willing parties. Why can't we make it happen? I want to see it.
Oh yeah.
Because like,
has Jacob done a debate on the Book of Mormon? Could not possibly be naturalistically explained.
Jacob is doing the whole thing, like, unless you're Alex O'Connor level, you're not worthy of his time.
No, I mean, he's pulled that stuff on him from the start, but at the same time too, I have talked to Jacob behind the scene where he said that if you were willing to and agreeing to do the trans or the queer theory debate as well, that he would do both of them. But
he's blocked me, so somebody who hasn't blocked, let him know that Colby is down to do the debate as agreed. Sounds like we've got an agreement. Let's make it happen.
Hell yeah, we'll tell him. Well, cool. He said I'd debate him on that if we did the Book of Mormon debate, the one he already accepted. I want to see both of those.
Yeah,
I'm in, and I'll super chat the hell out of it if it all happens. It could happen, but I'll take your word for it, and I'll put it to the test. I'll talk directly to Jacob and say he wants to do the whole thing, and we'll see it happen. We'll learn like what your opinions are on all that sorts of stuff. But that would be
that coffee machine.
Super interesting. What's that?
I hear the clicking.
Oh, do ya? I'm over here jamming out to the Donkey Kong Country underwater song, so I can't hear it.
That's not what I'm hearing.
You said you'd take the burden of proof on the Book of Mormon? Troy says he thinks Jacob was playing games. Well, I do think he was playing games because he knew that people can. He generally knows that people won't take that or won't go into it, and at the same time, there's just a whole level of me going like, if you're just hard truth, why not just say yes? Just say yes.
Yeah. No, I mean that is the thing. I mean that's the thing we talk about with John DeLynne's group and all that stuff. Like if this stuff is so obvious, if it's so rational and scientifically based, and you've got all the data and stats and evidence, then why is everybody afraid to even like Jonathan can't even
what I imagine is like the real world where we really could just be like, hey, we're just all going to say the hard autistic truth thing no matter what, and it just never turns out to be the actual world. You can't be that guy over in Mormon stories. You can't be the guy for the past several years who just said, hey, I don't think Leah Thomas looks like a girl and he shouldn't be competing with those. That breaks Title IX. You just something simple like that and you're out. And it's been ridiculous that world's been like that for 10 years now. But I
had that conversation with this dude who you could tell he wasn't like so the trans women in sports thing is just such an obvious losing issue because nobody really believes it, right? Like you just know it when you look at it. And so I remember talking to this guy about it, and he's trying to defend it because he's more left leaning. And I was just like, dude, you don't have to marry yourself to an opinion just because your team does. Like you can just say, no, this part they get way stupid wrong.
Well, there's this like whole issue. So like, I mean, it just comes up this week that DeLynne claims he doesn't want politics on the show, but he lets certain sides, the world of Marcuse, as we've always talked about, right? Yeah. Like the people on the left can say all they want, and then he'll go like, "Oh, we shouldn't talk about this." But then the second somebody on the conservative side of anything says anything, no politics on my show. And he's asked for volunteers, and we volunteered up multiple times. He said they wanted different people to defend or go in and speak with John Larson, and we said we would go speak or talk about whatever sort of issue.
Oh, that reminds me. I was going to ask, because like, how long have we been doing this podcast now?
Like 3 years.
Is it 3 years? Is it more than that? I just wondered because work had me drive out to Tooele today, and the Great Salt Lake is still there, John Larson. We had 5 years to save it. It was going to be gone, and we were going to live in the Dust Bowl in 5 years, according to John Larson, and that was like 3 3/4 years ago. And the lake is right where it was when he said that.
Well, it's because he fixed it.
Oh, that's right.
What fallacy is that? What fallacy is that? Ergo Proctor Hawk or whatever.
Let's go. Since we got Colby here right now, like, was he here when you were asking about that whole thing about the extermination order? Who was that one?
Oh yeah. I gotta bail because I I don't know. I'm on call tomorrow.
Yeah, we won't go that much longer, but you can cruise if you want to cruise. This has been a little bit all
keep
over
it
the
on
place.
in the background, but yeah.
Thank you, Sarah.
But yeah, I'll see you guys.
Yeah. Have a good one.
What were you asking about the?
On that extermination order one, so like Colby said, it was a straw man because they weren't saying that extermination order was justified.
Oh yeah, no, they very clearly said that, like, and we're not justifying it. That's not. That wasn't my issue. My issue it was a stupid argument.
The thing of like where the who was the guy?
It was Sidney Rigdon. Just
Sidney Rigdon
said, like, if anybody tries to kill us, we're gonna kill them. And I was like, yeah, that's fair. What do you mean? Like, I'm not a Sidney Rigdon fan or anything, but that's fucking Stalin could have said that, and I'd be like, oh no, that makes sense. Like, if someone tries to kill you, you can kill him.
Yeah. It gets to like a justification for the thing. Like you know, nothing like justifies like the violence, even though they weren't saying it justifies it. They were saying it's just more complicated than how Jacob wanted to present it. Do you think that's a fair?
Oh, one of my other beefs with that was like I thought that was a horribly misguided argument just from what I knew. And then when I actually got on the show with Jacob, he then showed me the very next sentence in that quote, which was Sidney Rigdon saying, and we'll never be the aggressors. I was like, well, shit, that makes it sound even worse. Like, I was already totally against you on that. And then that's the part you left out. And I'm trying. I'll extend some grace to Colby. I think he's a good faith actor. I think he's.
I think he is too. I don't think
Colby's
that
an honest
he's
guy.
lying. Yeah.
I just think he was wrong on this, because he was like, well, you got to pick and choose where you like leave out the quote and stuff like that, and people can extend the quote a little bit to make it look better. It's like, well, yeah, if that side of the quote negates the point you're trying to make, then yeah, that kind of makes you look bad. And he said, and plus, he could have been lying. Sidney Rigdon could have been. Yeah, you know what? He could have been. He could have been totally lying and just dog whistling to all of his followers that, no, you know what? Wink, wink. What I really mean, wink, is that we're gonna fuck these people up. And you're right, Colby. They were doing a bunch of day night shit already. And yeah, Starbase Collab, very fine people on both sides. That's a perfect example of something that's lasted for going on a decade now. Trump said there were very fine people on both sides. And then we cut off the crow right before he said, and I'm not talking about the Nazis and the white supremacists. They should be condemned completely.
I'm going to ask Jacob about this stuff. I'm going to try to get it going and talk about it, because I mean, I would love to hear the whole thing, not just to hear the Jacob side, not just hear the other side, but from the original part of it. That ultimate deal frustrates me, and it also frustrates me. I think it especially frustrates Jared here, who's the same. Is like Forrest is his brother, and he's here and there, and just like the level of a boogeyman that they turn Jacob into, it's almost like in a Voldemort way. They give him more power. Sort of deal.
Delin has actually refused to say his name. I cannot tell you how fucking cringe that is. Yeah, I can't think of. There's never been someone I dislike enough to be like
Jonathan Streeter. Just his name. I've been on with the War Radio guys, and with Jacob, and with Quick, and so has Jonathan Streeter. Will just go in and talk with them. It's just like, it's not the biggest deal. It's only a big deal if you pearl clutch and have run into something where you can't argue back just in straight good faith. But I mean, maybe Jacob backed off from all that sort of stuff too. But I don't know, Colby. I would love to see you navigate a debate like that and avoid all fallacies when it comes to arguing for the empathy or whatever sort of deal with. Like, I mean, it's a little hard to talk about this because we're thinking about certain things that we can't share on here, of debates and arguments that we've witnessed that that are ex-Mormons reverting straight to being exactly like Austin 5. Yeah.
Well, and in total honesty, Colby, I would love to see the Book of Mormon debate with Jacob, because
Yeah, both sides of it.
From his, like, I get along with Jacob, but from his side, I, for the life of me, cannot understand how you make that argument.
Yeah. But at the same time, too, is like I've just never gotten the whole thing of like, why is Jacob so scary to talk to? And just like hanging out over on the Thoughtful Faith page, he like invited me on just like in a split second or half second. We just started talking and it was all fine. And
Well, that was actually, it was Kulch messaged me right after that Jacob episode dropped, and he was, Kulch is a weird dude. You don't expect him to be like super honest, but he is. Like he's just kind of a nice guy, and he was asking, he's like, okay, level with me. Do you think that like some of us have like a Jacob derangement syndrome, kind of like the Trump derangement syndrome? And I was like, yeah, I think some people do. I think a lot of people, Jacob is like, Flip will criticize him for a lot of things, but he is very intelligent, and he's very good at what he does, even if he is using underhanded tactics. And so he can be, he would be intimidating to debate. Like, I kind of joke around about how the easy argument, well, Joseph Smith wrote it, duh. But like, I wouldn't debate Jacob on the Book of Mormon because, first off, like, he is a smart dude, but also I really don't want to go back and research all that shit that I researched a decade ago.
I don't keep track of the whole.
I don't care that much. I'm just like, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's not real, but yeah, whatever.
I do think RFM and Kobe do a great job at that stuff, like keeping track of all the who and what's and all that sort of stuff.
Well, and like,
anything that's like kind of factually provable or debatable. Like, I mean,
well, and I'll tell you, when he asked me if I wanted to do it, I was like, I don't know. There's a good chance I'll end up agreeing with him on a lot of shit. And he's like, well, just watch it, see if there's anything you don't like. And the Sidney Rigdon thing was really the reason I agreed to go on that. And I told him, I was like, look, dude, if you get into the Book of Abraham stuff, I'm not going to have anything really to say in your defense because I think they're pretty right on that. And he's like, yeah, I want to talk about that in a different video. So, like, you guys.
That's only what it gets to is that all the way back to Hume all the time, too. It's like you're talking about whole different realms when you're talking about what is the is and what is the ought. And the ought end of the world, the is stuff is falsifiable to a level, right? And that's easy, especially when you can get a falsification. But the moral side of stuff, the ought side of stuff is way, way tougher. And I think Peterson is astute, or at least has much and plenty to say about that stuff that is worth listening to. And it's not, it is just dismissing it all, especially for like one or two kind of goofy performances from him. Because nobody's always like speaking perfectly all the time. I think it's over the top. I think it's also wrong to say that he's absolutely perfect in that realm, but he just has too much stuff that is interesting to say, and it's not really just him saying it. He's standing on the shoulders of other philosophers who made those cases probably a bit more rigorously than he has. And when it comes to moral things or things of the humanities, all this stuff's both a lot more complicated and has been a lot more screwed up by a lot worse people than Peterson. Maybe Peterson just deserves some hell for it because he got extra popular with certain people, you know. But I don't think he's topped Foucault, and I think Foucault's done way more damage. And yes, ex-Mormon world is Foucault out. There's Foucault everywhere. I used to point it out and talk to people about it, and you're not going to come across too many ex-Mormons, especially ones that have been through many things. Dan McClellan is a Foucauldian. There's Foucault all through his like doctoral theses and all that sorts of stuff. And I don't think Foucault is just like 100% wrong either. But I also don't think he's like 100% right. But on top of that, he's just way more popular and does way worse with all that stuff than Peterson ever did. Reese says Foucault, Starbase Cole, yes, it's mostly a question of if I'm interested to know truth. Yeah, epistemology is tough, and it's way tougher than just kind of read atheism epistemology, and that's one of the things that Peterson's complicated, and like most of like all these other philosophies, philosophers have complicated over time, and it's just Sam Harris for sure didn't figure it out in his little book or whatever, and I think that's just kind of like the ultimate point that you're getting at, especially like when you're talking about fallacies when it comes to moral questions and all that sorts of deal, or good, better, best, all those sorts of different ideas, or what's a good way to live a life, or what you should do with who knows what or the other. Is I think that stuff just gets far more complicated, and it's not so easy to just be the one who dunks on Mormonism for forever and never branches out to other bigger issues that permeate the ex-Mormon world.
That's a Starbase Collab says every non-LDS historian I've heard online will claim Brigham did not order every non-LDS historian I've heard online will claim Brigham did not order Mountain Meadows, but all the ex-Mormon commentators claim he did. That's called motivated reasoning or confirmation bias.
Because the answer is we don't know, right?
Yeah, well, honestly, the Mountain Meadows, from what I can remember, again, it's been more than a decade since I've really dug into this shit. From what I remember, there's like maybe some tenuous evidence to say that he did. And like, from what I know of Brigham Young, I wouldn't be super surprised to find out for sure that he did. But I don't know.
Troy says Hume did bridge the is-ought gap. Well, I'd say attempted to bridge the is-ought gap. I mean, they call it Hume's guillotine for a reason, but human nature and moral sentiments, I mean, baked in by human nature.
Seth already bridged the is-ought gap, so it's already been solved.
Yeah, see, I actually think it is Foucault who throws a wrench into that, Troy, like talking about when he gets into his historical contingencies. That's what Foucault's whole purpose is of whenever he goes. The Foucauldian genealogical method is to go throughout history and point out, real or false, all the different ways we had completely different moral views on certain things in different tribes throughout different history, and stopping and say, but who's to say, what's to say, who's to say, what's to say? So what the whole thing does is points out that humans can come to very, very vastly different perceptions on what's morally good or not in different situations. And he's usually arguing that case to get to a point of saying, who is anybody to say that me having sexual relations with underage boys in Tunisia in a graveyard is bad? Who are you to say so? You know, and his whole thing is to try to upend that and throw a wrench through it. And I think he does. I think he does pretty well on that sort of deal. But where I think he kind of oversteps stuff is announcing that so much of where our current understanding of morals, or what is good or what is bad or what is better, or even like sexual age preference, or all these different things that could shift and move over time, was done through some top-down conspiratorial patriarchy, or you call it like the biopower, like the sciences of the time. Usually says like there's some sort of capitalistic intent behind it, or some sort of a science power from the 1800s on of doing vulgar categorizations as that's a good question, and I don't even know that one. Troy, do you think that Hume claimed that he bridged that gap, or was just attempting or suggesting? The
Starbase Collab said, because of mail by horseback, Brigham was 2 days late on even getting word to stop it. Well, maybe. I don't know.
But that's just ultimately the point. Like I've always said, I hate the argument that Penn Jillette always makes, which he says, I rape and kill exactly as many people as I want to.
Yeah, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Well, it's
but it's also just like missing like a context of where that desire or human, like the fact that you are lacking that desire.
Yeah,
has a stew behind it, has a something that you are baked in, and you know.
Yeah, Penn Jillette, born into one of Genghis Khan's raider clans would probably have a little bit different of a stance on that.
Yeah, and that's there's different stances all over the world right now, and then that's another area where Foucault's right. He's turning you on your head. He's stopping and saying he's not right because like a lot of his different historical claims were complete lies, and when he was confronted on them, he just said, "Well, all of history is a lie, so I can make up lies too." But some of them were true, and some of them were real. And but his large point is like it was totally viewed murder or child rape or sibling sex was totally viewed differently from this culture to that culture to this culture to that culture, in this year to that century to that century to that century. So why is what we landed on now matter or any sort of thing? Like that?
Why is incest wrong? Explain it to me without using consequences of incest.
Yeah, exactly. And I do get Forrest's point that
true versus good.
No, that they're trying to use some sort of a outcome to make the argument itself a good argument, or or something like that, or that the Mormonism is true, or that sort of deal. But I do just still feel that even if it's like the thing is true and you're just kind of making a jump that's why it's good, and you don't really have like a further proof of it. I mean, I think there could be cases where it is like you have a direct proof of like. I'm talking about areas where you don't know yet if the porcupine throws its quills. I'm talking about those scenarios. Yeah. So it's a fallacy. It's a fallacy to assume it if it turns out to be one way or the other. But and so many of different of the moral areas I think have areas where you can't, like, we don't know exactly. It feels like we can't exactly describe why high demand religions produce better than not, even though I don't know, we can, right? But it still just feels like it shouldn't be that way, or shouldn't be so hard for secular people to survive and thrive and grow or turn into Star Trek. But seemingly they can't, not as well as it is a fallacious argument to say that makes those religions true, like Forrest's point, or propositionally true. But then you get to Peterson saying what is true, and Peterson's not wrong that if you look at the word true, you can look at it in a Foucauldian way and say, what did true mean in 1800? What did true mean in 1700? What did true as the true arrow flies, true as my true love's love? Like, there's so many different equivocations of what the word true means. So what are we talking about true? But we know that you, in your intentionality right there, were asking about is it propositionally factual, and maybe they could reword it to, pull a Wittgenstein on him and reword it to him like that, and he'd be forced to answer it. Like, Peterson is the resurrection propositionally factual? Could you ask him that question and he wouldn't equivocate?
Maybe. I don't know.
You think he still would?
I don't think he'd equivocate. I think he'd dodge it a little bit. He's weird and dodgy on that
Just wouldn't
question.
Answer it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will give to Troy and Colby and Forrest that it's not zero. Like, I'm not saying Forrest that Peterson's like 100% on board, but we've always said that we assume that we think he hides the ball a little bit because he's he has a Reister and Peterson answer. That's true. He did answer that one when what's his name?
What's that?
One last try on the argument from consequences, because I've been in and out with it. Let's see. I think Hume's point was that moral oughts are expressions of sentiments rather than objective truth. The gap is less a logical problem and more a misunderstanding of morality's nature. So those oughts can be contingent, according to Hume. They can be historically contingent or time contingent or something like that. They're not. So it's just. It's the difference between the church is true because it leads to good consequences, compared to the church has utility because it has good consequences.
No, I get that. So I get that. I guess like in the video that you guys were criticizing of Jacobs, he pretty explicitly claimed, when his Alex O'Connor thing, he pretty explicitly claimed like when he's listing the good consequences. I'm not saying that means that it's true. I'm just saying that maybe we should look at it because of that. And it seems pretty fair. If I'm trying to, get my ideology out to people, I'm going to explain to them why I think it's true, and I'm going to explain to them why I think it's good. Are we going to talk about the football player?
Oh, we do need to talk about that football player, which is one of the things too. Like, I mean, I appreciated like how RFM referred to that, but I still think it like wasn't enough because like it's ridiculous that football player went through false rape claims.
I actually know nothing about this. I didn't watch anything about it, so.
Okay, so you don't know like the story of how he had a false rape claim against? Well, I don't. I poisoned the well and said false rape claim there. Nah. That's how easy it is to commit a logical fallacy, but I didn't mean to do that. Just like the usual change for the church would be that wouldn't be fallacious if it could be defended, which it definitely can in some respects. How to get into that? What I'm saying is, if you go and read like the way that William James and C.S. Peterson, I've been talking to you about this since forever, is that they do try to make those arguments that come back that would, if one of those churches were true, it would still be a fallacious argument or something like that, right? But the William James and C.S. Peirce do make the argument that you can select from things that seem to be better or worse based off of the consequences, and some of those things could be moral systems like a church, and that could lead to which church is the truer church, which why I say it's not postmodernism, it's pragmatism. Ranks stuff as it we'll get into that later, so I think I'm boring you with it. Let's get back to the sex thing.
Okay, so is this a quarterback that was recently like he's getting kicked out of BYU for the honor code violation?
Sorry, my thing popped out right when you asked the question.
Is this the quarterback that's currently being kicked out because of an honor code violation?
He's being kicked out for an honor code for this violation because in this situation he had to admit that he did have consensual sex with the girl. Right?
Okay.
So it got broke. I think it was broken on the Mormonish or the Mormon News Roundup. I mean, I saw it on ESPN or something like that. So this quarterback came highly ranked to BYU, like really, really highly ranked. And the really highly ranked guy, I think it was the first year or second year. I haven't watched BYU close enough for the past couple of years, but it came out a month, 2 ago that this gal came out saying that he had raped her, and there's a rape kit and everything. So watch out, this guy is going down. And it wasn't a criminal claim. It was a civil claim. She wanted $300,000 or something like that.
Wouldn't you want to take this fucker down?
Yeah. And also supposedly you have a rape kit with it or something like that. So after all this time kind of goes by, it turns out she's not able to produce the rape kit. She had a bunch of flirty text messages with him in between when the rape supposedly happened and didn't. Right. She also initially claimed it was a different football player than him.
Really?
And also, I guess like in some interactions with some sort of therapist or something like that, she was sticking with that story for a little while and then switched it to this guy. And this guy did have interaction with her, and he did have sexual intercourse with her. Now, one of the other issues with this is this guy's Jewish. He's not even LDS, right?
Oh.
But
Starbase Collab said he's BYU.
Yeah, but you commit to BYU, you commit to the honor code, right? So in the defense, he came out and said, and he produced like those text messages and all that sorts of stuff, and he said yes, I did have sexual intercourse with her. I don't know that he ever even had to like admit that or not, because I mean, I guess he's just being honest or whatever. But I don't think she ever produced the rape kit, and the police officers like committed that or said that this was never produced. We're still waiting on it. They were agnostic about it. We're still waiting on it. Could she produce that rape kit for us? Anyway, they came out and said, yes, I did have sexual intercourse with that gal, but all this isn't true because of all these different reasons. And then the other side dropped the case entirely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is it was definitely rape.
It was definitely rape. No, it was definitely not rape. But so like whenever I just kind of reviewed it, I mean, like I saw Rebecca Biblioteca say, wow, this is just it's a big warning. It's just something says like, watch out what you're doing out there. Watch what you're doing. And of course, initially they're saying, well, is he going to get the same sort of punishment that all the other people get for having sex? Well, he got a 7-game suspension. I don't know like what other sort of suspensions or, I mean, do people get kicked out of BYU for sex? Has that been some of the stuff in the past, or is it just like suspensions for a year?
So I think it kind of depends. It depends on the bishop, and I think because it's based on the bishop pulling your ecclesiastical endorsement. So it's sort of that bishop roulette thing where I remember when I was in BYU, Idaho, my bishop was the most chill guy ever. We had a roommate that did not go to church the entire semester and still got his ecclesiastical endorsement. But then Morgan, her bishop, said he would pull their ecclesiastical endorsements if he found out they weren't attending FHE on Monday. And I have homework to do is not an excuse.
That's what it actually said?
That's what he said to the ward. But this one is probably sort of high profile enough that there was a lot of pressure on, on the bishop or whoever to be like, you got to be consistent here, buddy. Like,
yeah.
Frick. Okay.
You went to BYU, Idaho?
For a bit. I didn't graduate or anything. I dropped out to do this program.
Yeah. So what was the what's all the stuff up there? Like, what's the rule? Like,
one of the things you need in order to go to any of the BYUs is an ecclesiastical endorsement, which comes from your bishop, right? And so a good amount of it is left up to his discretion. So if you got a cool bishop that doesn't give a damn if you pay tithing or go to church, then you're golden. But if you got a hard ass like what Morgan had, he would even get mad at her when I was on my off track. She would come to my home ward sometimes in Idaho Falls, and she was in Rexburg, and he'd say, no, you're not allowed to do that, like, because he's a dick. But he can choose to pull your ecclesiastical endorsement for any reason he sees fit. So you got to sort of know what kind of bishop you have in order to keep it. And I would say that it's what I was saying before. This case is probably high profile enough that the bishop got enough pressure sort of from the outside world saying like, look, this is your rule. Are you going to be consistent and apply it to him? You can't just let him slide because he's a quarterback.
Yeah. So they gave him 7 games, and in the world of college football, that's way too long. Like it's an eternity. Yeah. And so it's looking like, I don't know if there's been an announcement since I last checked, but he's probably going to leave to go to a different college that's not nutty about that stuff. And after they got through the whole thing, because if like the stuff looked the other way, they'd probably throw him under the bus and all that sorts of stuff. Like, oh, this is so terrible. These men, patriarchy, all that sort of deal. But the opposite's obviously true here. And I don't know, you can just kind of feel a pin drop like, well, gee, well, gall. But RFM really did at the end say, if she really did falsely accuse and all that stuff, that's not good.
If it was one of the like 0.02% of times it was a false accusation, then yeah, that was terrible.
But it's worse than beyond not good. It's a freaking nightmare. I don't know. I guess he said that he'd follow an honor code and all that sorts of stuff and whatever, but he's not even LDS and that sort of deal. You know,
I mean, you did sign the thing saying you do all the shit, but the shit that you have to do is pretty stupid. Troy said, former BYU student here, can confirm Bishop roulette on ecclesiastical endorsement is a real thing. Some handle honor code infractions completely differently. He's right. Even like the student housing is kind of a nightmare at BYU. We had this stupid ass filter on our internet that we had to sign into, and so it was because it was to keep us from watching porn, because that's mostly what they care about. And so I tried to sign into it, and it would like tell me I needed to make a new profile every single time. It was like safe search or some shit like that. And so I started getting pissed off because it would never remember my former profile. So every single time I got on my computer, I'd have to make a new profile. And I would start I started writing, my profile was like, fuck safe search. Like, remember my goddamn username next time, safe search, like as my username. And I come to my apartment one time, try to log in, and I'm totally kicked out of the internet. And I look, and my fucking landlord is there looking for me. She's like, "Are you Jared?" And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "I saw that you said some pretty unsavory things about safe search." I was like, "Well, yeah, they kept screwing up, and I kept having to create a new profile every time." And she's like, "I think you need to apologize to them. You were a missionary. That's not language becoming of a former servant of the Lord." And I was like, "Well, they should do their job better." And so she calls this safe search guy and is like, apologize to him. I was like, "Yeah, sorry, I said mean things about your crappy company." He's like, "Well, why didn't you just call us?" And I was like, "I don't know. I could have." And anyway, we get off, and my landlord, she hugs me, like, "We'll get through this." Like, I had just confessed to my bishop that I cheated on my wife or some shit like that. I was like, "You're fucking nuts, lady."
Yeah. Okay, I looked it up, and this ChatGPT would, I think, it agrees with Forrest and Kobe, but I think the difference is I think the point that I'm making still kind of shows through a little bit. Is William James's pragmatism an argument from consequences? Great question. William James's pragmatism is not exactly an argument for consequences in the fallacious sense, but it does prioritize consequences in a very specific and philosophical way. Argument from consequences fallacy. This is a logical fallacy where someone argues that a claim is true or false based on whether the consequences are desirable or undesirable, not on whether the claim is logically or factually accurate. God must exist because life would be meaningless if he didn't. This doesn't prove God exists. It just expresses a preference for a meaning in life. William James's pragmatism. James argues that the truth of an idea can be evaluated by its practical consequences, not merely whether they are pleasant or unpleasant, but whether they work in guiding action and helping us navigate reality. The truth is the name of whatever proves itself to be good in the way of belief, and good too for definite assignable reasons. William James's pragmatism. This isn't fallacious because James isn't saying it's true because I like the consequences. He's saying what we mean by truth is tied to how an idea functions in experience. Summary: James's pragmatism is not a fallacy. It's a true theory of truth that evaluates ideas by their practical effects in the real world. Argument from consequences of fallacy only when it substitutes emotion or desirable outcomes but argument from consequences of desirable outcomes. I think that's I think that's just like a very close like equivocation of like what the things are right there. But substitute emotion.
It's what I said before. I think that the difference is true and good. Like, you can make an argument for something being good independent of it being true. Troy called you out for using the ChatGPT fallacy.
That's a good one too. Yeah. You get what my point is right there, though. Like the pragmatism thing. The pragmatism thing isn't a propositional truth either. Is my point. I'm arguing that it's not propositionally true. it's fallacious a little bit, but it's a good argument. I like the argument. I like James's pragmatism, but it's hardly better than the fallacy.
Yeah.
I think you and I have repeated that many times over the years. You know, it's
sort of real life. When it comes to the differences between words, the good and the truth, once it comes into real life practice, those the blurries get a little bit fuzzy. The blurries, oh God, I've had too much to drink. The lines get a little bit fuzzy.
Yeah, but I mean that's only a point. But if it's, I will grant the point to Forrest and Colby that maybe it's not tech. Well, you could ChatGPT technically says it's the other, but you see what I'm saying? How it's like basically the same damn thing right there. And I still kind of stand by like most of philosophies, basically kind of trying to justify certain things that aren't perfectly justifiable.
Well, I would say so. In Thoughtful Saints, I did a long time ago. I did that post about I'm an alcoholic, and then 5-dimensional elves appear to me and explain to me that I need to stop drinking, and it totally turns my life around, making a pragmatic argument to believe in something not true. And I was like, should I stop believing in the 5-dimensional elves? And I did that intentionally because there's mostly Mormons in there and then a decent amount of ex-Mormons. And I seem to remember Forrest trying to explain to me, well, I explained to you the practical reasons why alcohol is bad so that you didn't have to believe in the 5-dimensional elves. I was like, I don't know, man. That's pretty fucking risky. Like, for all you know, if I stop believing the 5-dimensional elves, I jump back into alcoholism, like, fully.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that one's fully just kind of like embracing the fallacy, you know what I mean, right?
No, it is. What I'm like, and that's where Peterson would say, that means that the 5-dimensional elves are truer than true.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I get what you're saying in that circumstance. I've used that example. I had a conversation with Forrest on that where I'm telling him like I always call myself a theist, and the reason I call myself a theist is pretty purely pragmatic at this point. I know that the outcome of believing in a God being better doesn't mean that there really is a God there, but I also know that I would say that everybody needs to believe in a God in order to be the most moral person they possibly can, but I'm pretty sure I have to believe in something in order to be pretty moral. I think I would end up being pretty shitty if I didn't try to believe in some type of God and pray to it in some weird, clumsy, retarded way.
Yeah, like I've said before, like I feel like I can't not believe in souls, even if I wanted to, even if I put it in like on some sort of paper that I've figured out that it's meat bodies. I think even if I completely, did the I forget that mathematical term for like a proof, but if I had a perfect mathematical proof, I'd say, well, I'm still going to believe in soul because I have to. I can't look at humans and just think that's a meat body there.
Yeah, I know, that's the ultimate Chesterton's fans. We talked about that. Don't go watch Seth's video where he talks about how science disproves the idea of souls because it'll fuck you up. Because he just disproves it right away.
Cells. Yeah. Anyway, what ultimately is like why did the logical fallacy thing bother us so much? Really?
Because it wastes time.
Yeah.
I think like the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe little entry that I was reading on it today was actually pretty decent. In kind of explaining that logical fallacies are important to know so that you can apply them to yourself. They're less important to know to apply them to other arguments because if you look too hard for them, you can find them literally everywhere, kind of like what you were saying.
Yeah.
And then you are dismissing, because like if I say the Earth is a globe because the sky is blue, that's fallacious reasoning. But if you dismiss my conclusion based on faulty reasoning, then you're dismissing a valid conclusion.
Yeah, and I think part of the issue with this too is like, who's the robot who's not committing them kind of constantly and all that? I mean, I think we're just kind of like moral beings just stumbling through logical fallacies in the world. You know, that's all it is, and still we somehow pragmatically work our ways through that. You know, you can always get some stuff better. And one of the big questions that they were asking in there, and it's one of the things that goes back to the Peterson and Harris debate, is they said, is truth always useful? And that goes to some of those Mormon questions. And I think for sure it's not always useful. I don't think that I would be Rorschach. Like I would totally be Rorschach. Like you find a truth, you say the truth.
Yep.
But
Rorschach was the good guy.
I totally see some things where knowing the truth made stuff worse. You know, finding out the truth about something made it harder, or made it more difficult, or made you make a bad decision.
It's crazy how Alan Moore wrote that and thought that everybody would understand that Rorschach was the bad guy.
Yeah. Well, maybe did he think that everybody was supposed to, accept the Ozymandias? Like it would be better for everybody to accept that Ozymandias, what was it, like a gambit of the trade-off, the utilitarian trade-off of Ozymandias? Like he thought everybody would assume the utilitarianism of Ozymandias was proper. Like, thank goodness he did that.
Yeah, no, he stated pretty explicitly that Rorschach was supposed to be obviously the incorrect guy. Not just in that, but through his whole thing. And like, he's brutal.
But the flip of that is, my question is, are you supposed to understand Ozymandias as obviously good?
I think so. I guess I haven't seen him say that explicitly, but you are supposed to understand Rorschach is obviously bad.
It's so goofy. It's so strange to me. But at the same time too, like I don't know, the truth. The truth that he had is that he had the truth that Ozymandias killed a city to save the world, and he was going to release back to the world that he did that to make the world redirect its anger towards something outside instead of
give them a common enemy.
So if he got that information out, that truth out, and it returned them back to their nuclear civil war, was that bad truth?
Well, you're making an argument from consequences right now, aren't you?
Yeah. But it doesn't say anything about the truth of the thing or not, or whatever. Like, but that's completely an area where Peterson and Harris got hung up forever. The nuclear, like the truth of a nuclear bomb. Remember all that?
Oh, it's been years since I've seen it.
Yeah, they got into like details like, well, is it good or true that you can like figure out how to get a nuclear bomb, and so would it be true that you can blow up the world with a nuclear bomb? And Peterson said something like that isn't true or something like that, because he was doing a William James on it. So and that was a really kind of weird way of framing that one. But I don't know, man. I think once again, I think it's pretty hard to say that these different philosophers, when they get that hard and weird into philosophy, that they're just bullshitters, unless like Peterson's just a bullshitter, or those guys are bullshitters, unless they are all bullshitters. Like that's just, I think that's just my general point of that, is that if Peterson's a bullshitter, all of philosophers are bullshitters. Or if they're not all bullshitters,
I think most
they're kind of just doing what Peterson's doing.
I think most philosophers are bullshitters.
I can accept that answer. Like I can be like, yeah, Peterson's full of shit, but like so was William James, or so.
I think he can be full of shit in some ways and spot on in others. Well, I mean, I gave you the example earlier in the chat about Ayn Rand, right?
Mhm.
Trying to fall over backwards, explaining to you that every action you commit is self-serving in some way or another, and you can make a coherent argument saying that. But I'm like, okay, I mean, let's say I find out 100% there is no God, there is no afterlife. As soon as I die, I fade into non-existence. And also, I know 100% that, like, next week they're gonna cure aging. They're like, this is gonna come. We give you this vaccine, and you're immortal. You live forever. I should do anything I can. Like, the most self-serving thing would be to take that vaccine. But then a guy comes in and he has two guns. He points one at my head and one at my son's head and says, choose. I either kill you or kill your son. I'm like, I still know that the right thing to do is say, kill me and not my son, even though, like, I'll fade into non-existence and he will go on to live literally forever. You would think that the most self-serving thing would be to choose yourself to be immortal and your son to die and not exist anymore.
Yeah.
But I know she would fall over backwards trying to explain to you why.
Don't not how Rand would explain it, but don't some people try to just like explain that of like the selfish gene, but those genes are your genes, the kid's genes carrying on type stuff.
Yeah, you would, but you would think that the logic would override that. That, like, well,
could she still argue it if you did that for a kid that was not your genes? He was just a baby, and you were obviously the older one, and he was the younger one.
Oh, Ayn Rand would still argue it. She would still.
That was still for your.
Yeah,
for your benefit.
It's still like you did the thing that you did because you thought it was altruistic, and therefore, like, you're doing a thing to be a good person. So it was self-serving, even though you're giving up mortality.
Did you ever hear that Radiolab episode of the guy who went out and tried to prove that he could be altruistic and he killed himself, just trying to give everything away? It's a true story.
Well, I've done that thought experiment in my head, and that's where Ayn Rand is good. Like, that's where her philosophy helps, is that you can kind of realize that, all right, I could make an argument that everything is self-serving, but so what? Because that's what I would say to her if she's like, what you're doing, even though you're giving up immortality so that your son can have it, it's still self-serving. I'm like, fucking, I don't care, lady. I'm shut up. And, but I've done that equation in my head. How could you possibly, using that logic, do anything self-serving? And you can't. The only real way to do it would be to end up killing yourself, and even that would be self-serving because you're doing it to try to be an altruistic person, so that serves you dying knowing that you were altruistic.
Sure. This is it. Radiolab, December 14th, 2010. The Price of Altruism. Lynn talks to Ornharm, author of The Price of Altruism. This is about George Price, George's daughter, Anne Marie and Kathleen, who helped us to get to know the complicated genius. In 1967, George left his family, went to London, and wrote a mathematical equation to explain why one creature might sacrifice its own interest for another. Carl Zimmer helps us understand why altruism is such a problem in the first place and how family might hold the key to understanding apparently selfless acts. The so-called Price equation changed biology and ultimately led Price to spend the rest of his life trying to transcend his own equation. And I hate to give a spoiler, but he killed himself trying to. He killed himself trying to be altruistic, and in the process, I guess, ditched his family. So can that not be altruistic because you ditched your family? But yeah, I guess it's like when it comes down to all this stuff. Is like,
well, you actually end up being non-altruistic. You're right, because, like, if you think, okay, if I do something to serve my family, that's not altruistic because all I'm doing is carrying on the selfish gene and pushing forward my own genetic code. Therefore, what I have to do is serve other people above my family. I have to have an out-group preference to the point where, if the choice was between killing my kid or killing a random guy, I would choose to kill my kid. And it's really difficult to argue that that's altruistic.
Yeah. Well, whatever. I guess when it just gets down to all that stuff, I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know. I think it's only like been a workup because the ex-Mormon world has been such not a place to discuss stuff. But it's getting better. It's getting better. RFMs do it better. Colby listens to us. I mean, that's already came in to listen to us. I didn't even think he'd be here listening. So that's already a thing. Argue, debate. We can argue and debate and talk about it more. And that's just always been the hope of the world. And as long as John DeLynne's there.
No,
As opposed
I
to
think,
what Randy Bell says. Randy Bell says he lets anybody to the table. It's just not true. We've all just been X'd and axed out for just basic.
Yeah, I definitely think. I think Kobe's an honest dude. I don't think he's trying to be deceitful or dickish or anything like that.
No, I don't think so at all. Like I said, I think most of that stuff. What I'm talking about is just unawareness of how much of it is inside of academia and the ex-Mormon world as we go calling it out everywhere else. Like I said, that Maven was posting a Foucauldian argument about queer theory on Mormon stories, and we got kicked out for it. And that guy's whole argument, the Forest whatever dude, is 100% of the way. Commit the ChatGPT fallacy and type out, give me the beats of a Foucauldian book, and how he goes through his genealogical method of calling into question the history of categories or something, claiming that the way it got categorized in the future was arbitrarily done or usually done for some sort of biopower or capitalism power or religious power, and then announced that it all must be upended for the future and that sorts of stuff. And she's posting that in Mormon stories. We're getting kicked out for saying something about it. And all we said is like all I said is I know of Colin Wright. I could post something from Colin Wright on here, who is a biologist and has his page called Reality's Last Stand. And now I'm not in Mormon stories anymore for it.
Well, Kobe doesn't seem to understand why we will lump queer theory in with this. And that's pretty much the reason, is because it's the only religion on Mormon stories that you can't criticize.
For sure. And he said that he's talked to me about it and all that sorts of stuff. I know that he did, and he claimed some sorts of different things, but it is also true. The way I still perceived it is that if he had just taken up that end of Jacob's gambit, that whole debate could have happened, And not only, I mean, he said it went one way. The other thing is I have Jacob's end of the story of that whole thing. But there is a whole level of me of if we were all ever in the truthy world, that all logical fallacies aside, any sort of old debate, we can be all right, we'll talk about that one. What issue? Why should it be? So I mean, I guess I'm just circling back on why it just eats at my cross so much, and it's obviously something. And I know Colby has respect for Jonathan Streeter, and he's talked to him about it. We know it's been something that's been in Jonathan Streeter's craw for a while too, because it is obviously something that acts exactly like what they claim is the worst parts of LDS. When it gets especially when it gets especially ideological. So anyway, anything else? I got a puppy dog starting to act up. Sorry if that one got all sporadic and weird. It was a big long 3-hour episode, and putting the thoughts and stuff together is always a pain in the ass with this what you do. So.
Well, you let me know if you can think of any other ways that I can prove how just goddamn smart I am to everybody around me.
Yeah, you prove that, and I'll try to come up with a way of how I don't think ultimately every single philosophical axiom that they prove is still just a fallacy in itself, too, because I don't think philosophy does a great job of proving its axioms all the time. So
yeah, well, that's what axioms are.
Yeah, but just like with religion stuff, like I say, it's got some use. Yeah, I feel exactly the same about it as I do for religion.
Yeah, I know it. Well, it's a Flip's whole do yourself a favor and call it faith.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing you could possibly do when it comes to axioms is I think that truth is good. And why do you think the truth is good? Because I just think it is. I think it's self-evident. And I have faith in that.
yeah, and that's the point. That's the exact same thing I was pointing out. Is like when Risto threw out the gambit and is when you go trying to justify your thing, and that goes back to Jacob's point. Is like when you're on the hot seat, it's always tough, and when you're the one picking apart, when you're the criticizer, it's always easy. You know what I mean? And yeah, when you get back to those things and you get asked the why of thing, you're gonna probably give some sort of circular answer. Cause it's good, cause it's better, cause I like it, cause good consequences, or it's good because it's good. It's true because it's true. You know. So.
Are you gonna do anything to celebrate the whatever fucking Civil War? Right? Is that what tomorrow is?
I thought I only celebrate on August 20th. You want to know why?
Why?
Not only is it my birthday, but that's the 1619 date.
Oh,
and I only celebrate 1619 date.
Yeah, well, whatever the fuck we're celebrating tomorrow, you know, probably.
No, that's White Supremacist Day.
Probably Martin Luther King Jr. or something. I can't remember. Whatever it is, you know, I'm a fucking millennial. Who knows?
Are you doing anything?
Yeah, we're gonna go camping.
Oh, well, that's something. I got a gig. I have to play a gig. So.
I'll enjoy. I think it's George Washington's birthday or whatever.
Is it? No, it was John Adams.
I just
you're wrong though. It is John Adams.
No,
and
is
Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, right? It is their birthdays. Yeah, I'm just being a dumbass. There was this guy at work.
Well, for some reason I brain glitched and thought that you were talking about that two situations.
No, I was just acting like a fucking moron. There was this guy at work who, when I first started at this facility I'm in now, he's one of the operations supervisors, and I come up to him. He's got this shirt on that says like 1776 and has an American flag on the back, and I was like, 1776. Oh, what's that number mean? And he's like, hey, are you serious? I was like, oh, is that when the slaves were freed or something? Are you fucking with me? Was that Martin Luther King? You're fucking with me, right? Like, he was annoyed with me.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Let's call it good because I got a dog starting to act up. So.
Well, inform him how he's committing logical fallacies by doing so. That's actually the I can piss anywhere I want fallacy.
Oh yeah, I could get him to shape up with that, right?
Indeed.
That's a fallacy. That's a fallacy.
Well, I'll see you guys.
Go. Later, everybody.